Welcome and good evening to the Jinn&Tonic show on this Friday, the 31st of March, 2017. It's Rob from Speaker's Corner, your host tonight, and hopefully we will have some other folks joining us shortly. Abu was going to do a show tonight on another topic, but unfortunately he's been called away last moment, so I will be here potentially on my own, or hopefully we will have some other people joining us shortly. Some potentially exciting news for a future show, hopefully not too long away. I have been in contact with a person who is very knowledgeable in philosophy, in particular in epistemology. He's quite a well-known YouTuber. He's an atheist, and I would call him a philosopher, and he's agreed to making a guest appearance on the show at some point in the very near future. So hopefully that will be happening. His YouTube handle, if you're interested, is Ozymandias Ramesses II. And if you do a Google, you will find many conversations where he's involved with a wide range of different participants in different shows like the Magic Sandwich Show and various others. And hopefully he's kindly agreed that he'll come on the show. So I will keep you updated as to when that will be happening. And that show would probably most likely focus on philosophy and some of the more broader questions that theists often bring up, both Muslim and Christian. He's based in Canada, and he's much more familiar with dealing with Christians. So I said to him, it'll make a welcome change to, have some, yep, you know him, Ozymandias, that's the one. So hopefully he will be joining us on a future show. I'd love it if he was a regular. I've watched many of his videos. I've learned a great deal from him. So, I think he could certainly bring some clarity. Probably I can learn even more than I have already. And I'm sure other people who are interested and willing will pick up a lot. So hopefully that won't be too long in the future. So what I thought, because sort of Abu wasn't able to be here, and that was sort of, he didn't give me a lot of notice, what I thought the show would be about today. There you go. Welcome, BJ, a fellow Canadian. Yes, indeed. There's some great Canadians, as there are in every country around the world. And obviously we welcome anybody that's interested and wants to speak and has a voice and has got something of interest to say, whether we agree with it or not. Obviously, we like to hear different viewpoints, and I learn whether it's somebody I agree with or not. So feel free to let anybody know who's interested in the sort of topics that we discuss here to come and join us, listen, and perhaps join in. What I wanted to potentially do with this show is kind of make it a slightly broader topic, which was more along the lines of, is there any inconsistencies in Islam? I thought I'd leave it broader like that, so that if we have people joining us, we can go from there and examine whether, in the broad sense, there's any inconsistencies or whether there's any contradictions within the Qur'an or within Islam more broadly. And hopefully, we'll hopefully get Saracen or a couple of other people to join us, and they can give their view. Now, I'm well aware that most theists will suggest that there isn't any contradictions, there's no problems, there's no inconsistencies. And obviously through my conversations at Speaker's Corner and listening to people here and viewing them online, I would disagree with that in a number of different respects. And I'm also very keen to hear what other people have to say on this. What I thought, thank you, welcome, thank you very much. What I thought we'd start with very briefly, just before hopefully we get a couple of people joining us, is one or two news items just to get us started. So I thought I'd start with one of those. So I'm going to share this. Please tell me whether you can see this. So this was a news article that came out a few days ago, I guess it was. And it's really about, it's a bit of a dramatic picture there. Blasphemy, Denmark's double standard, which was an interesting article. If we look down at it here, Islamic exception takes root in Europe. In her acceptance speech at the National Secular Society's Secularist of the Year Awards ceremony, Yasmin Rahman stressed the perils of Islamic exceptionalism, the urgent need to address Islam's religious privilege came into focus last month when Denmark's state prosecution service decided to enforce the blasphemy section of its criminal code by fining a 42-year-old man who burned a copy of the Quran and posted a video of the act in a Facebook group. The blasphemy fine is especially troubling since the Danish authorities did not prosecute a similar case when Christianity's sacred text was burned. Europe is one of the most liberal countries in Europe. In 2005, its Danish Prime Minister, Anders Rasmussen, defended the publication of 12 cartoons of Muhammad, stating, "In Denmark, the freedom of speech and the freedom of the press is not up for negotiation." During his weekly media briefing, the Prime Minister said, "In Denmark, it is the courts who decide this kind of thing and not the government." He further noted that a crisis was no longer about the 12 drawings in the Jyllands-Posten, I guess it is. It's about everything else and different agendas in the Muslim world. Well, clearly it seems to me, well, there we go, they actually say it. It seems Danish freedom of expression has deteriorated considerably since 2005. I didn't even read that far, and I was going to basically say that in any case. In part owing to intimidation and a chilling climate of fear in which blasphemy laws are enforced, largely via extrajudicial execution. I'm not sure what that refers to. Jacob Macgamma, a Danish lawyer who founded Justia, a civil liberties group that monitors freedom of expression across Europe, called out the double standard that gives Islam special protection and said the blasphemy charge was a giant step backwards for his country. In response to the ruling, Cognitus News column, Robbie Travers posted a poignant question whether previous terrorist attacks in Copenhagen had shaped the national interest to protect speech of the Quran burning variety. So clearly here, in particular, I see it, and obviously, as you may know, there's been some, there's been a following in Sweden as well. I don't know if you followed the journalist who went into Sweden. I think he was sort of more of a left-wing journalist, and he went around to various places that were considered no-go areas, and I think he did a reasonable job of reporting what he encountered there. He certainly didn't appear to go in with agenda. He wasn't a right-wing journalist, and certainly the reporting and the reports that he did seemed to suggest that there were certainly areas where migrants and people coming in that had a different view on the world had certainly changed the society in certain places within Sweden. And obviously, here's another example in Denmark. And so what we seem to be seeing, of course, is people who have a liberal view, and I'm somewhat liberal. I do believe in freedom of speech, almost absolute, apart from the direct incitement to violence. I think everything else has a place to be said and has a place to be countered, be that racism, sexism, anti-Semitism, quote, Islamophobia, that, you know, made up illusory word. All of that should be allowed to be said, and of course it should be countered with facts and good reasons and evidence. But of course, as we see now in Europe, that's not necessarily the case. And in particular, the more liberal the society and the more there's pushback, and this certainly is not by any stretch all Muslims by any stretch, but certainly there does appear to be a pushback by certain elements that adhere to some form of Islam where freedom of speech isn't allowed, and where these sort of things happen, where you have people who are being prosecuted for burning a Quran. Now, it's not something I would necessarily do myself, but you know, if you own one, be that a Bible, a Quran, the Book of Mormon, whatever the case is, and you want to set it alight, that's entirely your prerogative. It's just a book. It has words on a page, that is. But obviously people take a great meaning to it and then become offended. And of course, that's a pet peeve of mine, this being offended. Because being offended is simply taking in something through various filters in your brain. You hear some words or you see an action, you interpret it in a certain way based on your upbringing, your social education. Then you have a feeling about it, and then you label that feeling with some kind of word. And so that whole process, which I could expand on greatly, but it's more of a psychological process. Once you unpack it, you can see that it really is, in a sense, it's a choice. So, you know, whenever somebody says to me, I'm offended, I would either, depending on my mood, I'd either say, well, you know, so what? And what about it? Or I'd offer them an explanation as to what that means and why it's an objective illusion. I agree that they are offended, that they can say they're subjectively offended, but that doesn't mean anything to me. It's just a way of interpreting an event or something that somebody said. So that's where, sadly, seemingly, at least in one case, and once it happens once, of course, that opens the floodgates for it to happen again. It then becomes, more of a norm. And so it seems like in one of the most liberal countries in the world, rated, the top 3 in terms of the good country index or other indexes that measure all the different components that go into making up a society. Denmark is up there in the top 3 year after year. And now we start to see this pushback against freedom of speech. So that is particularly worrying. And another one as well, a refugee was accused of murdering a German teen to be tried as a juvenile. Experts say he's 22. I don't know if you heard about this. This was the case of, and here it is, this young German girl. German prosecutors have charged an Afghan migrant with the murder and rape of a 19-year-old medical student. The suspect already served a prison term for a similar offense in Greece, but was released early. Officials in the southwest German city of Freiburg, home of one of Germany's elite universities where the incident had taken place, announced the charges on Thursday. The prosecution accused the suspect, known as Hassim K, of having attacked, strangled, and raped Maria Lindenberger, a 19-year-old medical student. So again, and this is not a push at Muslims in general, but here we see, and this is really more finger pointing at some of the Western governments. Instead of trying somebody, again, experts you can see there, he doesn't appear to look like a young man at all. And of course you can test for these sort of things. So we have science to the rescue, be it, through dental records and other ways of ascertaining somebody's age. But the reluctance of some Western countries now to prosecute, to call things as they are, for fear of some of the general population taking a dislike to migrants and immigrants, etc., seems to be doing exactly the opposite of what they're hoping. So the more they try to cover this up, the more they try and avoid talking about it or try them as a minor, do all of these things. And as this sort of gets out into the wider news, and it's often not covered by the bigger mainstream media outlets, the more normal people look at this and go, this is unacceptable. If you call somebody what it is, you call people what they are, call a spade, as you may know the term, then people are much more likely to, not rise up in that sense. But the more you hide this, the more people seem to be doing this. So that is particularly problematic, I think, as a general rule. I'm just going to take a couple of queries here and see where we are. So what's the hangout? Ali Bia, sorry, I thought I saw you join there a moment ago. The hangout today is going to be, are there any inconsistencies in Islam? And I'm going to leave it as a broad category. There's a few things that I can talk about here, and I'll bring up a few things. And so obviously, if you're interested, I'm not sure whether you're a Muslim or a non-believer, but you're free to join, and you can give me some of your thoughts. You should be able to do with your, BJ says, you should be able to do what you want with your own property as long as it isn't for insurance fraud, etc. Well, yeah, of course, I absolutely agree. If it's your property and you want to burn it, as long as you're not affecting somebody else in any way and it's not a criminal offense, you, of course, should be free to do whatever you want. If you attempted to burn your house down and that might affect the next door neighbor, like we have in London, in the UK here, all the houses on top of each other. So if I intentionally attempted to burn my house down and that affected, my next door neighbors, that could be problematic. Welcome, Raven. How are you, my good sir?
Hey, not bad. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. I'm good.
Enjoying some wine.
Good. Just reading a few comments here. We were talking a little bit. One of my pet peeves, obviously, freedom of speech. I was just talking about some of the news articles here, how Denmark has prosecuted somebody under the blasphemy law, which was fascinating. There it is there. So let me just stop that and go back to the normal what do we do? There we go. Just reading a few of the comments here. What I was interested in talking about today was, where have we gone? There we go. Is there any inconsistencies in Islam? I'd leave it as a broader topic because I've obviously got certain things, be it contradictions, be it scientific miracles, etc., etc. But I left it at is there any inconsistencies?
So you mean like verses that contradict themselves or claims that are proven to be false?
Yes. So is it claims? Is there something that is contradicted? Is there something that is said either in Islam in general, as in like a particular argument, or is there something in the Quran, for example, that is said and interpreted very widely as saying something, and then, our modern understanding says something else, essentially? Now,
I think it'd be a lot easier if you asked if there anything that wasn't.
yeah, you could do it that way. Yes, one could do it that way, and actually ask somebody. And welcome there, Saracen. Feel free to join. Oh, you're out at the moment. Okay.
Because that is the thing, though. I mean, when you say like inconsistencies, I think basically everything. And when I try and think of things that are true, I really can't. I can't really think of anything.
You mean as in that anything's true itself?
No, but it's factual. That anything in Islam, the Quran or the Hadiths, is actually factual. That you could actually show this is actually true. This actually did happen.
Oh, I suppose it depends whether you're talking about a historical event or a claim about reality in the sense of. So one of the things, for example, would be.
Well, a claim of a historical event is a claim about reality.
Yeah, well, yes, it is. I guess what I mean by that is, so they make a claim, for example, that drinking alcohol is bad, which I think, depending on how much alcohol, that could be true. Again, I've seen reports where drinking a glass of wine a day is not bad for you. So I haven't studied that in depth, so I can't make
to be fair, what the quote is that I can't remember it exactly word for word, but just to summarize. It's not quite that alcohol is all bad. It's that it does have some beneficial properties. It's just that the bad outweighs the good. So you really shouldn't drink it.
Yes, and again, it depends to what degree. If you have a glass of wine a day, as in like a wine glass a day, is that bad? Now, I haven't gone and done the medical research and I have heard articles here and there that say it isn't. So, are we talking
it really does depend. I mean, a lot of the harder liquors were originally created as home remedies, and they actually work for very particular ailments. If you have a cold, if you've got like a throat infection, a couple of sips of whiskey clears it right up, because obviously what alcohol does is it sterilizes infection, so it actually does work for that. When it comes to specific benefits, for a lot of good quality, like red wine, for example, actually has a number of properties that are quite good for the heart. Your risk of heart attacks greatly lowers if you drink red wine as opposed to white, because white is obviously made differently and it doesn't have those beneficial ingredients. Beer, for example, beer is very good at lowering blood pressure, releasing endorphins, which usually, it lowers blood pressure, so it more steadies heart rate. But this, of course, is with very moderate drinking.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you go to excess, but that's same with everything, though. Absolutely everything. I mean, even water.
Yeah.
When I was about 10 years ago, or 10 or 12 years ago, I remember reading the paper. There was this man in Scotland. He drank so much water, he went into a coma.
Yes, I've heard that. You can actually overdrink yourself and you can get physically sick. I'm pouring some water as we speak.
I mean, it's basically just like what my mum always says, everything's fine in moderation.
Yeah, my mom used to say the same, and I guess it depends again, because that term is quite broad. So I guess it depends what you mean by moderation. But from my point of view, we have good old science that as a general rule can give us a good indication of what moderation is. Now, obviously, that might vary between individual humans, but one can take a broad brush and, one could go for a medical checkup, and if we had enough medical information, we could say, oh, for your body type, your blood type, your age, whatever, here's what would be recommended as a moderate, let's say, amount of alcohol per day. So, there's always something we can fall back to reasonably objectively. Is it going to be perfect? No, but is it better than, just hoping for the best, or, having a drink depending on whether it's sunny? That's, I would suggest, there's a better way of doing it. But I agree. Most things can be done in moderation. One of the things that I was interested in here, Saracen was asking, can we provide some inconsistencies? Now, again, I've left the term broad, and people are welcome to disagree.
You know what? Give me 1 minute. There was I actually had someone a while ago challenge me to give arguments against the Qur'an, the 5 strongest arguments. So let me just look it up.
Cool. While you do that, I will attempt to play this little video. And the only reason I bring this up, and I don't want to be accused of attacking or focusing on low-hanging fruit, but this was specifically on a Muslim channel that I follow. And so here is, I don't know whether this will play the audio, but we will attempt to play this and see what happens. Can you hear that?
No.
No. Okay, so.
Oh, I can now.
Oh, you can? Okay, cool.
Now I can't. Oh, there we go.
Okay, that was a long version. I'm going to avoid the long version because that's like a 5-minute video. Here's a shorter version that I just edited down just so that we could focus on what it says in the Quran. Oh dear. The other guys are saying they can't hear any sound, all the viewers. So maybe it's just you and I that can hear it.
Well, I can hear it incredibly faintly.
Oh, okay. Well, hopefully you guys can read what's being said there, all the viewers. So verse 9, that's Surah 53, verse 49, and Surah 53, verse 9. Yes, I'm using headphones at the moment. It's basically saying here we are faced with a mathematical miracle of the Quran. So that's, oh, I know why. Maybe I didn't hit the present to everybody. Maybe that's why it wasn't doing audio. I'll get that right eventually. So basically, let me go to it here. Here is the actual, the miracle that is presented. Here we go. Here's the miracle itself. So the Quranic miracle is Surah 15. What did I say? It was Surah 59, verse 9 and verse 49. And so by the star, when it goes down, your companion is neither astray nor being misled, nor does he say of his desire, it is no less than inspiration sent down to him. He was taught by one mighty in power, endued with wisdom, for he appeared in stately form while he was in the highest part of the horizon. Then he approached and came closer, and he was at a distance of but 2 bow lengths or even nearer. So did Allah convey the inspiration to his servant, what he meant to convey. The Prophet's mind and heart in no ways falsified what he saw. So that's clearly talking about, it seems to me anyway, very clearly talking about Allah and Muhammad coming together, and Muhammad was 2 bow lengths away from him. And then it says in verse 49 there, 48 to 50, that it is he who hath given, that it is he who giveth wealth and satisfaction, that he is the Lord of Sirius, and that it is he who has destroyed that powerful ancient one. So clearly what's happened here, and I don't expect all Muslims to accept this, but I saw this in a video that came from one of the channels, and I was just amazed that you could, because I went to go look these up, and of course it's not talking about the Sirius star being 2 bow lengths away, and so they are taking that bowing and then using, it's 49, it's Surah 49, or verse 49 of Surah 59. And it's verse 9, my word. And those two cross each other every 49.9 years. This is a miracle. I don't know if there's how many people take this seriously, but obviously there was a professional enough video made to talk about this. What's your thoughts?
My thought says, as soon as I actually get done with those inconsistencies, I'm going to look up the holy moly for you. And you can actually, this is someone doing the exact same thing, finding scientific miracles, mathematical miracles, and prophecies that have came true, hidden within the pages of Moby Dick. I'm going to look that up for you.
Oh, yes, I'd love that. I'd love that. Please do.
And not just that. I mean, if I knew this was going to be the topic, I would have had a shitload ready for you.
Sorry, no, it was last minute. So maybe we'll do a more specific one like that in future. But yeah, that would be very good. Because I still get confronted with people in Speaker's Corner, and I'm not accusing of Saracen or anybody here of doing this, but I don't take it seriously. Well, that's good to hear, Saracen. I appreciate the fact that you don't take it seriously.
I mean, the thing is, I mean, I'm not saying these people are morons. Very intelligent people can be wrong. I mean, like, take Sir Isaac Newton, for example. Now, Newton, he was on another level. He really was. I mean, if you read some of his works, it's smarter than me and you put together, right?
Oh, yeah.
But he was an alchemist. He believed he could turn base metal into gold. He was also a practicing Christian who spent a lot of his time looking for miracles in the Bible. He even came up with a load of miracles, and he even calculated when the second coming was going to happen, and that's it. Bye bye, lights out, end of the world. Apparently, Judgment Day, Armageddon, according to Newton, is going to come in. I think it's 2062, 2064.
Yeah, and then, of course, it'll change when that date comes around and nothing happens. And sometimes people point this out. They go, Newton or somebody else. Sometimes they mistakenly say Einstein, which, of course, we know is not the case. But Newton, yes, he had Christian beliefs as far as we know. But all that demonstrates is that you can have a part of your mind that's incredibly, intelligent, etc., and then partitioned off, and you're believing some, like you say, alchemy, some strange and crazy things. That says nothing about anything other than the person can have conflicting, thoughts in their brain, not on one particular topic, but on different topics. So, you can be spot on one thing and then completely out of left field and, floating off with the fairies, as somebody I know says.
And also, there are things that you just don't know at the time, or that you get mistaken about. I mean, this whole idea of like, this such and such was really smart, and they believed what I believe. Therefore, no, that's just an argument for authority. That's just an argument from authority. If you actually want to be taken seriously as a debater, that is a fallacy you should learn on day one.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, that still happens a reasonable amount. But again, remember, and most people are just, apart from the regulars, that the people that are interested in this topic, say you and I and some others like, Saracen and others, won't look these things up. And so, you're speaking to people oftentimes who, have just heard these things and oftentimes, haven't looked into them. And so it's very easy. We are prone to making those sort of errors. I can't remember whether it's type 1 or type 2, but false positives, and that sort of thing. So we're prone to doing that.
I don't mind making errors so long as I recognize I've made an error and I can learn from it.
Yes, and of course most people don't sort of have these conversations, so they don't realize they're making an error, and they can and if they're not confronted with people that have different views, and particularly more learned people, you feel quite happy in your ignorance. And so I like to be
Speaking of, let me just get this out of the way. So, 5 strongest arguments against the Quran was a challenge, and I was actually a bit flippant at first. I just went, the Quran, sanity, reality, nonsense, common sense. Hope I helped. But I actually ended up thinking that I'd expand on the above, and so broken down into those 5 parts. So, number 1, the Quran. The Quran claims itself to be the perfect. By the way, am I breaking up at all, or is it?
No, you're coming through very clearly. No problem at all.
The Quran claims itself to be the perfect, uncorrupted word of God. That's its biggest flaw. It invites challenge in a way other holy texts don't, and is really too arrogant for its own good. The level is enough that it doesn't have the flexibility needed to stand the test of time. The fact that it doesn't have this flexibility and that it needs it in the first place is an argument against it, in my opinion. Sanity. There's only so much a human being can reasonably be held accountable for when it comes to spiritual matters. There's a verse in the Quran which says Allah has not given us 2 hearts. I personally view this as metaphorical, not literal. We view and believe certain things a certain way. I cannot at the same time believe in the Quran while seeing flaws in it. Reality. The Quran, like all the other holy texts, claims to be the word of God. The way to verify this is testing it, see if it stacks up. Quite frankly, it doesn't. Dust devils and jinns, spontaneous human creation, great flood. There's a lot to choose from, but I'll pick a few. The story of the Ark and the Great Flood. This would have happened around 4,000 years ago. It's quite simply impossible for the number of races, ethnicities, and the huge amount of genetic traits to come from one incestuous family in just 4,000 years. It cannot happen. Something else that puts a hole in the story is the amount of people who were thriving at this point. God flooded the entire world, except for the Chinese, who were developing at an incredible rate and remained unaffected from a global flood that wiped out every human on the planet. The Japanese were also unaffected, and the Africans, and the Europeans, and the Native Americans, and the Aztecs, and the South Americans, and the Middle East. The flood never happened. It's not real. The Quran teaches that humans were created from clay in a specific creation. If you're to count on the hadiths, then it's just even more ludicrous. We know the first human was not a 90-foot tall clay giant. Even if you don't take the hadiths into account, it also doesn't account for evolution, proof of which is overwhelming. Nor does it account for the number of people today who have Neanderthal DNA in them from before the Neanderthals went extinct. Everything I know to be proven fact contradicts the claims of the Quran. The only logical conclusion I can come to is that it was a story told by ancient societies because they didn't have any answers. Adam never existed. It's not real. The sun orbits the earth. Yeah, we've known that's bullshit for a few centuries now. It says in the Quran that the embryo/fetus, the bones are the first thing to form. Quote, so we made the clot a morsel, so we made the morsel bones, so we clothed the bones with meat. This is wrong. The skeleton is actually among the last to be formed. You'd think the all-knowing creator of everything would realize this. It's wrong. The stars are missiles to be hurled at jinns. I haven't read the Quran in a while, so I can't remember the exact quote, but you can look it up to see exactly what it says. This is also wrong. The stars are just stars. They do the exact same thing as the star we orbit, the sun. Women are defective in intelligence. Coming from a culture where gender mixing is the norm and close relationships aren't looked down upon, I can tell you this isn't true from my own experience. And then there's current trends in school grades, sciences, IQ, and employment performance. The fact that there are women in Mensa. If you don't know, Mensa is like a super genius club. Only 2% of the human population globally have a high enough IQ to qualify for membership. Now we live in an age men and women have equal rights. Women are on the same level and even starting to outperform men. So I'm going to say this is wrong. Nonsense. Do you believe Allah put a veil over our hearts? If the answer to this is yes, then my reply to that would be that I'm blameless. If the reason I don't see the truth of Islam is because Allah put a veil over my heart, then it stands to reason I'll be punished by being sent to hell for a crime I didn't commit. The reason I'm saying I'm being punished for a crime I didn't commit is that Allah deliberately put a veil over my heart so I would never know him. Therefore, the fault is Allah's, not mine. Do you believe nothing happens except by Allah's will? If so, then it's the same as above. If nothing happens except by Allah's will, then Allah made sure I wouldn't believe in him. So again, the fault lies with Allah, not myself. Do you believe Islam teaches there's no compulsion in religion? If so, does that mean if you don't accept Islam as true, then you go to hell? If so, this means that Allah has told us something to be taken as truth, and he punishes us for taking him at his word instead of assuming he was lying. Do you believe in the virgin birth? If so, can you understand why I might think it's more likely that a teenage girl told a lie rather than a virgin magically conceiving a child, carrying it to term, birthing it, and the child, while still an infant, speaking? Can you also understand why it may be confusing that said infant would only speak once to a few people and refuse to speak again to others, which would cause all doubt in the divinity of Allah to be wiped away? Here's a situation. Let's say there's something in your house you don't like. It offends you. Let's also say you have the power of a god. Would you A, throw away the thing you didn't like or give it to charity, or B, bring it to life, give it intelligence so it can understand what's happening, enable it to feel pain and torture it forever and ever and ever? Which is more merciful? Common sense. It becomes a common sense issue. Let's say that I'm wrong. Let's say all the things I'm of the opinion are true are wrong. It doesn't change the fact that I find the Qur'an unbelievable. I can't have more knowledge than what's available to me. Let's take evolution. I find it believable. I'm convinced of it. The Qur'an goes against it. I have no reason whatsoever, nothing at all, compelling me to believe the Quranic story over proven scientific fact. Or another, let's take the Big Bang. I'm convinced by what knowledge I have that before the universe and after the universe, there was no Earth. This planet did not exist. It took a very long time for our star to be born and for our planet to form. This seems plausible to me. From what I know of physics and cosmology, I can accept this. I have no reason whatsoever to believe that the Earth existed from the start and was ripped apart from heaven. Or another, the Qur'an and Hadith suggest a flat Earth. At one point it's spread out like a carpet, at another the Earth is like an ostrich egg. Had to pick the bird that buries its egg and flattens the soil. Allah will roll up the Earth like paper, like parchment paper, and on it goes. Everything I'm aware of tells me this is wrong. It becomes less and less believable to me. So with all this in mind, common sense tells me that the only truth that lies hidden in the Qur'an is simply the truths of the cultural norms and mindset of that society and time. Historically and psychologically it's interesting, but that's all it is. No more, no less. And I have to admit, these aren't even my strongest arguments. I haven't thought about this endlessly. I haven't delved in the theology to throw things at you. The above is just what came to mind as I sit here filling the time on a lazy Sunday evening.
And that would have been Would it now be a a Friday evening?
Chatting on a Google Hangout, smoking a fag, drinking wine.
All good, man. Great. Thank you for that. Almost you had it prepared almost like you kind of did know that it was going to be on here. So
Well, no, it's just come up
that.
before. I mean, I've got another if you wanted it, where I sort of explain why the story of Moses is bullshit.
Well, let's hold on to it. We'll come back to that and see if we need to use that. But I mean, you covered quite a bit there, and obviously it'll be useful to hear what other people have to say. When you one of the first things you said, among many things there that are obviously quite interesting, is you talked about the Quran inviting challenge, and I'm fairly skeptical of that in the following sense. And it was a video that Mansour was involved with, and he was speaking to, I don't know if it was a Christian or an atheist, but obviously not a Muslim. And the person asked him, "Why should I believe the Quran?" And his response was, "Bring a verse like it." Now, this to me,
skeptical of that. That is the challenge.
No. Well, I'm not skeptical of that being the challenge per se. What I'm skeptical of is that it is a challenge in the following sense. When I speak to Muslims, they go, no. The only way you can bring a challenge is if you bring it in Arabic. You can't bring an English challenge.
No, that's bidah.
Say again.
That's bidah.
What's bidah?
Innovation. It's a sin.
Yeah, so you've got to bring a challenge, i.e., when you challenge the Quran in its literary brilliance, you've got to bring a verse like it in Arabic.
Nope,
correct?
Bidah. That's bidah.
But that's the challenge. In order to disprove, what's the challenge?
Bring a chapter like it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
No, it doesn't say anywhere in the Quran it has to be in Arabic. But the idea that it has to be in Arabic is a way for Muslims to get out of it, because barely anyone on the planet speaks Arabic. The Quran does not say anywhere it has to be in Arabic. That's bidah.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Right. Now I understand you. Right. Yeah, well, that's what I've heard. Now, they may well have, in their own view, a justification for saying that. Some scholars suggest that it is, but if you're saying that in nowhere in the Quran does it say that you need to bring a verse like it or a chapter like it, and it needs to be in Arabic, then...
well, no, but it's like when Muslims say to me that the Quran commands women to wear a headscarf, a hijab. It doesn't. And I've had so many Muslims make this claim to me, and I'm just like, okay, show me where. And then they'll actually go off and research it, and I'm like, oh no, you were right, it doesn't say it.
When I did ask them, there was a verse that talked about women needing to be covered.
What the Quran says, it tells the believing women to cover their modesty. It specifically mentions breasts. Draw your cloak around you, cover your bosoms.
Does it not mention your head or your hair? I thought it did.
No, the hijab is not in the Quran.
Okay. I thought there was something about covering more than just the top part of you. There was something about covering your hair, because that's obviously one of the things that all the women do, whether they, whatever sort of dress it is.
Part of this, I would imagine, actually comes from a tradition of slavery. What would happen in Islamic society is that the covered woman would be covered to distinguish herself from the slave woman. There's actually a hadith that talks about Abu Bakr, one of Muhammad's companions. There was a slave woman, and she was obviously quite distressed, and she tried to cover herself. She tried to cover her breasts, and Abu Bakr saw her trying to cover her breasts and beat her for it.
Oh, and then what happened after that?
I didn't read on. I thought, okay, you know what, I've got better things to do with my day.
Getting back to
there's only so many sick hadiths I can read in a 24-hour period.
Okay, so TJ said in the comments here, Quran 33, verse 59. Oh, Prophet, this is, which one? Yusuf Ali's translation. Oh, Prophet, tell thy wives and daughters and the believing women that they should cast their outer garments over their persons when abroad. That is most convenient, and they should be known as such and not molested. And Allah is oft forgiving, most merciful. Truly, if the hypocrites and those in their hearts is a disease, and those who stir up sedition in the city desist not. Okay, that's another verse. So it was verse 59. Yeah, just cast their
Well, like
outer
I said,
garments over their persons.
Talks about covering your modesty, covering your breasts. The actual hijab, it's not there.
No, this just says persons. That's the use of Ali version. Pickfell's version says to draw their cloaks close around them. Now, again, to me, that means, like you say, that it's around your body. It doesn't say anything about your head. Now, again, you could stretch the interpretation to mean head. There may be
Well,
a
the whole bosom thing is because some of them, the ex-Muslims that I know, they're actually fluent Arabic speakers.
yeah.
And that's just what they say to me over and over and over. So the actual original Arabic, draw your cloak around you, cover your breasts or bosom.
Here's another. Here's another translation. Mufti Tawik Asami. Terrible with the pronunciations. The women of the believers that they should draw down their shawls over them. Again, TJ in the comments is saying Hadith says to cover everything except hands and face and hands. TJ, if you can find a verse and one of the translations that clearly says that, because all these verses and translations I'm looking at here don't suggest that you have to cover your head. It seems to suggest that you draw down their shawls over them, etc.
One of the places that it might come from, if I remember correctly, there's a hadith. There was a woman who really wanted to have kids. She was apparently like really, really desperate to have kids. And she apparently said to Muhammad that if she actually found out she was pregnant, she'd be so overjoyed, she'd run naked through the streets. And if I remember the hadith correctly, Muhammad's reply to her is that you could show like a single strand of hair, and that would be the equivalent.
Of running through the streets.
Of running naked through the streets.
Yeah.
Apparently, a strand of hair will be the equivalent.
Right. Okay.
Oh, well, I can't quote that. I honestly cannot quote that hadith. It's something I remember from years ago. So, sorry.
Yeah. I mean, unless it's Bukhari, or how many other of the hadiths?
Or possibly the wood.
Okay. I wanted to get back to the Quran challenge when you said it invites challenge. So let's assume that you can do it in any language. Some people, like you say, maybe are disingenuously saying that it has to be in Arabic. Whichever way,
I don't think we're saying it disingenuinely. I think we genuinely believe it.
Yes. I mean, that invites its own problem, of course, which means that obviously that's a just disingenuous statement to anybody who's not an Arabic speaker. So if the claim is that you have to bring a verse or a chapter like it, and it has to be in Arabic, well, then saying that to anybody who's not a fluent Arabic speaker and in the Arabic of the time, because again, most Arabs apparently are not Arabic, native Arabic speakers in the dialect of the Quran. So if that's the case, then that's not a challenge to any other person. But even if it was in English, saying bring a chapter like it, what does that really mean? What are the criteria? I've asked this, and of course I don't get a proper response in Speaker's Corner. They all dance around it. They can't really tell me. I say to them, well, okay, so who's setting the criteria and who's going to be the judge? So you've now issued me a challenge. What are the criteria for me to go away and to attempt to meet this challenge?
Well, it's not there.
Well,
It's an impossibility. It really is like saying, show me a child more beautiful than mine.
Yeah.
It's not something you can do. But only real way to actually do this challenge, I would assume, is to actually either say, "Oh, so I was reading the Quran, and what do you think of what do you think of this verse? Ah, yeah, it's good. That is. Oh, you believe it's from the Quran? Oh, I made it up." Or do you just do like raise your hand, okay, I'm going to say 3 sentences. 2 of them are from the Quran. 1 of them is from me. Raise your hand if you think it's which one it is. I mean, there's really no surefire way to say it. And I mean, I think another thing is when Muslims say it's the greatest book ever written, and they try to give all these reasons. Okay, what's the second greatest? Well, what do you mean? Well, you're giving all these reasons why this is the best ever, and it's like, it's a fact, it's the best. So obviously someone somewhere has actually given it a good ranking system. So if this is the best, what's the second best?
No, well, again, they're just repeating what they've heard, isn't it? That it's the greatest book. They don't have a second greatest. They just know of a greatest one. Saracen was basically saying there in the comments. The Quran challenges was specific for the Arabs at the time. The challenges over 1400 years ago. That may be your view on it, Saracen, but I still see it. I heard it from Mansour. I can find the video for you, and that is still one of the responses that is at Speaker's Corner by, quote, the, in inverted commas, intelligent Muslims, which is bring a verse like it. So why is this book so wonderful? Well, bring a verse like it. All you have to do, it's so brilliant that nobody can bring a verse like it. So people are still saying that today. So I appreciate that might be your view, but it's not the view of some of the intelligent Muslims that are in Speaker's Corner. So, but even if it was in English, we don't have a criteria. We don't know who's going to judge it. So it is, in my view, an unfalsifiable claim. And so, of course, you can sit back and have a smile because you've set the bar to a point where nobody could even attempt to make that challenge, because we don't know what the criteria, and even if we did, who judges it? And so, for me, it's a meaningless thing. But I've heard Mansour do that. So if I do get to speak to him, I'll ask him, why are you asking people this? Firstly, is it supposed to be in Arabic? I've got somebody, and I won't quote Saracen's name necessarily, but I've spoken to a Muslim, or a Muslim has spoken to me and has said that this challenge was for 1400 years ago. So why are you bringing the challenge today? Who says that is? Where can you show me that this challenge is still valid today? And where can you show me whether it's in Arabic or not? And what are the criteria, and who makes a judgment?
It's also the idea of the context itself. Like a lot of Western Muslims will actually say it's to do with the written word. It's to do with it's a challenge of literacy.
Yes, it's the literacy of the Quran. In the literature,
of course, again, the Quran itself does not say this. The Quran does not say, bring a chapter like it in a lyrically or poetically, or just in any way to actually specify that it's in this context. It just says bring something like it. And so you do have different interpretations of what this means. For instance, one of the people that I used to have be friends with, she actually spent a number of years in Saudi Arabia, and she's a fluent Arabic speaker. She's also a what's it called? A Hanafis. I can't remember the word. It begins with H, but it means someone who's memorized the entire Quran. So she's a fluent Arabic speaker. She's memorized the Quran, and we were talking about this whole bring something like it. And I just said to her, it's not even like it's not even difficult to do. I could snap my fingers and bring a verse like it. And she challenged me to do it. So I said, okay. I thought about it for like a second, and I says to her, "O you who believe, bend not to passion's sway, for the heart is deceitful above all things, but Allah is all-knowing, wise." And I just says to her, you speak Arabic, you know the Quran. Would you believe that is from it? And she said, yeah. So, boom, right there, challenge matched. I've got this other mate. He's not an ex-Muslim. He's a practicing Sunni Muslim. He's also Iraqi. He's from Baghdad. So he's not a Westerner, and he's born and raised in a culture that has been dominantly Islamic for the past 1,000 years, and his understanding of this is very different. When he thinks, if this is from other than Allah, bring something like it, he takes that to be at its word. So he thinks that bring something like it means bring something like it. And we actually got talking about, and I actually mentioned this a while ago on the show. Remember I said we got talking about that verse in the Quran which talks about how a slave can earn its freedom. And then I showed him Roman law, which predates the Quran by centuries, which is exactly the same. So again, boom, done.
Yeah. Hafiz is what some of the commenters are saying. Is
almost
the
got it right.
Yeah, that you were talking about there. Here's a couple of, and I say potential because I haven't come up with them, and I was just looking online. Here's a couple of.
I can't believe I'm the only one that's called in.
Contradictions. Yeah, possibly other people will join later. We'll give it some time still.
Keep in mind on the chat. Keep in mind though on the chat. The first comments can very quickly disappear. It seems to me they just disappear randomly. Sometimes they stay for ages. Other times they just go. So you might want to just like periodically just put the link in.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. So I'll put the link in while people read this. Here we go. There's the link. It's also in the description on the live stream itself. So if you go into the description itself, you will see a link to the Hangout there. So here we go. Are these? And I put.
That's exactly what I said about it. That's exactly what I said earlier. You know, when I was reading out those 5 things. Yep. You know, I have no reason to believe the earth existed from the start and was ripped apart from heaven.
So there we go. Heavens and the earth were joined together as one creation before we clove them asunder. And then in another passage in Surah 41, verse 11, he comprehended in his design the sky, and it had been as smoke. He said to it and the earth, come ye together willingly or unwillingly. They said, we do come together in willing obedience. So
that right there.
No doubt somebody will have a response to this.
On the one hand, it says earth existed from the start. On the other hand, it says the earth came together as smoke to foment its formation.
Well, the sky had been as smoke, and then it and the earth came together. Which again, no doubt somebody will have some kind of a response to this. So I'd be interested in what the response is. I've obviously challenged some Muslims on that first claim, the 2130, because they seem to want to, obviously make that appear as if it's talking about the Big Bang.
I saw this talk by Richard Dawkins, and he did this documentary where he went into a Muslim school, and like in the science class they were saying, fresh water and salt water won't mix because it says that in the Qur'an. And I saw him about a month or two after doing an interview, and he said he was absolutely gobsmacked. He wished he'd have replied differently. And he said, I can't remember if he said he did say this to the science teacher or he wished he did. Just please, next time in science class, get some fresh water, get some salt water, just pour them together, and just you can see that they mix.
Yes, exactly.
I think another thing it says, the very interesting thing is there are parts of the Quran which I'm assuming you know that during what's known as the Golden Age of Islam, Muslims actually saved and preserved a number of scientific works from earlier civilizations and actually contributed and improved on them.
Yes,
they were very a lot of them, particularly around Persia and Byzantium, were very well versed in ancient Greek medicine. If you look at the description of how children form in the womb, just compare it with Aristotle's eggs. Which again shows, if this is from other than Allah, bring something like it. It's like, well, you've actually fucking copied Aristotle's eggs. So, here's a book by Aristotle. Read that.
Yeah. So there's one potential contradiction. Here's another one that talks about the angels during the Battle of Badr. And so they're in Surah 8, verse 9, actually, but I just went from 8 to 10 so we could see the context around that he might justify truth and prove falsehood false. Okay, it's an interesting way of writing. Distasteful though it may be to those in guilt, remember ye implored the assistance of your Lord, and he answered you, I will assist you with 1,000 of the angels, ranks on ranks. And then further down in Surah 3, verse 123 to 124, remember thou saidest to the faithful, it is not enough for you that Allah should help you with 3,000 angels specifically sent down. So again, unless these are different battles, there seems to be a rather, glaring difference in the number of angels that were sent down to help. Now, one wonders, and no doubt, again, I'm sure there's some kind of a response that the Muslims will give that, quote, the scholars have gone and looked into and found some kind of apologetic here, because they can't say that those numbers are the same. I mean, clearly they're not the same. So what else can you say? You could say it's a different battle. You could say it's a different time in the battle. I'm sure you could sit and rack your brain in a way to try and make these two correlate in some way. But the numbers are clearly different there, and they appear to talk about the same battle. So that's another one. And one more just for interest, which is the older one. verse 70, sorry, Surah 70, verse, what is it, verse 4, but I've done 1 to 5 there. Question asked about the penalty to befall the unbelievers, the which there is none to ward off. The way this English is written, obviously, I know it's translated from Arabic, but it's not easy to read. A penalty from Allah, Lord of the ways of ascent. The angels and the spirit ascend unto him in a day, the measure of whereof is as of 50,000 years. Therefore do not hold patience. Patience is beautiful. And then, of course, in Surah 32, verse 4 to 6, he rules all affairs from the heavens to the earth, and in the end will all affairs go to him. On a day, the space whereof will be as 1,000 years of your reckoning. Such is he, the knower of all things hidden and open.
What does that even mean?
Which one? The second one?
He rules all affairs from the heavens to the earth. In the end, all affairs go up to him on a day, the space of... So does that mean that he sees 1,000 years of history in a day, or...?
Yes, essentially that's what it seems to suggest, yeah. It's obviously written in the way it's communicated there is not easy to understand for us. I don't even know if it's easy to understand for Muslims even at the time. But, so there's, again, a fairly significant difference in what a day is supposed to be measured as. And again, I'm sure there can be, this won't keep most Muslims awake at night. Those that are potentially really interested and who aren't looking, who look at this and don't go and look at the scholars to find excuses, they might look at this and go, okay, here's a bit of a problem. But I think most people would go and go, okay, I see a problem here. Let me go and ask somebody else who's thought about this maybe more, who's come up with an excuse, and let's, they'll help me with this so that somebody says, Detective Inspector Monkfish in the comments, maybe it's dog years. I don't think even if it was dog years, which is 7 years to a human year, you're still not going to get close. You'd have to do 7 times 7, so it'd have to be 7 times dog years.
Ali years.
Yeah.
Hey, TJ.
Who's there?
TJ.
Oh, TJ, welcome. Feel free to unmute yourself.
Hey guys, what's going on?
Good, man. How are you?
Same old shit, new day.
Yeah. Yeah. So
I was wondering because you guys have been talking about specific verses. I was wondering if you guys knew about 65 verse 4 and its implications.
What does it say?
Just repeat the verse so we know what it is. I'll look it up here while you speak.
Sure. 1 second. 65 verse 4. And if you are in doubt about those of your women who have despaired of menstruation, you should know that their waiting period is 3 months, and the same applies to those who have not yet menstruated.
That right there is why Saudi Arabia doesn't have an age of consent.
And that's Surah 65 verse 4, correct?
Correct. And I'll copy and paste the explanation from a scholar.
You know the interesting thing, if you go onto Qur'an.com and you look at the different translations, there are actually some English translations of the Qur'an which completely just they don't even say that. They just remove it from the translation.
So basically, what the explanation says that from what I'm reading, I'm reading a tafsir by his name is Maududi. He was I guess the spiritual godfather of Pakistan, and basically what he's saying is he says about 65 verse 4. Here, one should bear in mind that the fact that, according to the explanations given in the Quran, the question of the waiting period arises in respect of the women with whom marriage may have been consummated, for there is no waiting period in case of divorce. Therefore, making mention of the waiting period for the girls who have not yet menstruated clearly proves that it is not only permissible to give away a girl in marriage at this age, but it is also permissible for the husband to consummate the marriage with her. So basically, you can fuck prepubescent kids.
And generally,
the interesting thing when it comes to tasfiyas is just how it's like it just emphasizes the idea of being in the eye of the beholder. Like I remember reading some different tasfiyas for that verse in the Quran. You know, one that says that semen comes from between backbone and ribs.
Ribs, yeah.
Which again is actually from Greek medicine. They actually thought it was done in the kidneys.
then there's
But
another
I
thing
was reading
about
a few different
Jesus.
test spheres, and it's absolutely fucking amazing because you know sperm comes from your balls. Everyone knows this. And but some of the task spheres I was reading was incredible. There was this one task sphere that said, well, in the womb, the testicles actually start more on your chest, and then as you're developing, they go down to descend between your legs. So that's what it means. Behold the miracles of Allah, who he could know. And then there was another that was going on about, no. The task spheres, this task sphere said it's metaphorical because a man's strength comes from his sperm, and you feel that strength in your gut, and Jesus Christ.
I'm just going to paste what you've put there, TJ, into the main chat so that hopefully people can read that. Oh, it's too big to put in there.
Break it down.
Yeah, I can paste it. So yes, there seems to be, and again, we don't have any Muslims on here at the moment to provide their views on this.
That reminds me, holy movie.
But there certainly seems to be problematic verses just within the Quran itself. We're not even talking about, scientific claims or other claims that contradict reality as we understand it today. But there certainly here's just a few of them where the numbers and verses, etc., seem to contradict. And of course, again, one will be interested to hear what the response is to this. And of course, there's a lot of the predictions, aren't there? So, the one that I heard recently, and it was one that Tall Muhammad Hijab, one of the Speaker's Corner guys, you probably would know him if you've seen some of the videos. He's sort of got the facial hair around his ears as well and down. So he's got like a more of a full beard, but tall guy, about 6'6", 6'7". And he basically, and I looked it up as well. There's a I believe it's a hadith. I don't think it's in the Quran. I can't remember. I'd have to look it up again. It might be in the Quran, but there's a prediction talking about, and in the future, people will play music on their heads. That's essentially, I'll just need to look that up. But it's along the lines of people in the future will play musical instruments. That's right. Sorry. It will play musical instruments on their head. And so,
He's talking about metal bangers.
Well, I heard him say this at the time, and I was filming it. I wasn't involved in the conversation. And so I'm thinking, okay, is there anything at the moment where somebody plays musical instruments on their head? And then, of course, he goes,
Oh,
well,
yeah.
it's so obvious, isn't it? It's earphones playing music.
You've never seen Ozzy Osbourne raise a guitar above his head on stage.
Well, this is playing on your head. So literally some kind of musical instruments, almost like you're wearing a hat or you're playing drums on your head or something. And of course, he goes, oh, it's earphones, and you're playing, with like an Apple iPod. And I stopped, and it was like being slapped in the face with a wet fish or something. I'm going, really? Is that your explanation for playing music on your heads?
I once saw an explanation. I think it was, I can't remember the Quranic verse.
Hello, welcome. Is that Lord? Sorry,
you mind if I say something to the United Kingdom? Didn't mean to interrupt that gentleman.
Go ahead. Where are you from, Lord?
I'm from California, United States.
Oh, great. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, United Kingdom, if you Google United Kingdom Jehovah's Witness investigations on the latest scoop of the child molesting Jehovah's Witnesses, we need to do something about it. Or Google Australia Royal Commission Jehovah Witness, you'll find out what's going on.
Okay, we generally deal with Islam here, so obviously I'm against Jehovah's Witnesses as well.
I actually remember a couple of years ago, there was a knock at my front door. I opened it and there were these two women. One of them had like almost a local accent, but was a trace of something Eastern European. But it was these two middle-aged blonde women, and they said, "Hi, well, I was wondering if we could talk to you about the end of the world." And I said to him, religious or environmental, which I thought was a perfectly reasonable question. So I said, okay, can we talk to you about the end of the world? So I said, religious or environmental? And they just both stopped. Like, they were absolutely speechless for about 15 seconds. And then they went, religious, we're Jehovah's Witnesses. And then I just said to him, oh, is this like that thing back in the 70s where all the Jehovah's Witnesses thought the world was going to end, and then they were all disappointed? And I said, no. Is it like the time that came after it in the 80s? No. Is it like that time that came after it in the 90s? No. How's it different? They look so pissed off.
Yeah. Lord, I'm sure that's not a great thing, and I'm as much against Jehovah's Witnesses as any other theistic view. Primarily, we deal with Islam here. So if you've got any views on Islam, or if you want to share anything, please do. There's
Yeah,
not a
I
lot
used
we
to
can
be a
say.
Jehovah's Witness. They're worse than the Muslims, actually. They want everyone destroyed that's not a member of their cult.
Yeah, I think
They're
we've
worse
had
than.
some interactions with them.
Yeah, but a lot of polytheizing religions are like that. I mean, if you look at, I mean, a lot of people, especially in the UK, go on about Islam because that's the predominant religion that are shouting about how things should change. But I mean, if you go to the States, I mean, look what Mormons are doing. It's incredible. I mean, even in like Idaho, they've actually successfully changed alcohol laws to suit their religion, which you'd think flies right in the face of the Constitution.
Yeah. I mean, we could do a show on, Jehovah's Witnesses as an example, but then I'd want to keep it for just Jehovah's Witnesses because primarily we talk about Islam here. But I'm happy to do a special show if that's of value, that we could look into that and, educate ourselves. And you being a previous Jehovah's Witness, Lord, you could come on. So perhaps let us
Well,
know in the chat.
we're just thinking about how Jehovah's a conversation about Jehovah's Witness could actually relate to Islam. When it comes to seeking special privileges and wanting this and that, one of the stories I remember from a few years ago was there was a 15-year-old boy, 15, and he was from a family of Jehovah's Witnesses, and I think it was in like Birmingham or Liverpool somewhere, and he got into an altercation. I can't remember what it was. I think he was hit by a car, and the paramedics came and they wanted to give him a blood transfusion, and he refused it on the grounds that it was against his faith. Jehovah's Witness fall into the category of Christian Science, which basically means instead of relying on medicine, this is God's will. So you pray, and if God decides to cure you, that's God's will. If He doesn't, then that's God's will. So the idea is that going for actual treatment would be blasphemy. So this 15-year-old boy refused a blood transfusion, and he died. 15. And the local Jehovah's Witness community were praising him for this. We're sending out leaflets going on about what a martyr he was and how wonderful this was. And I just remember thinking, how the hell can you take the idea of a minor? I mean, this is a 15-year-old child who has had his life snatched away from him. And so this comes into the idea of not only when a doctor should overrule the wishes of a patient. I mean, I would say if they're a minor, then right there. But it also comes into, particularly when with Sharia courts and the idea of children and religion, and the idea of, should, particularly when it comes to children, should belief and faith that they have no choice in actually be paramount? Should it rule supreme? I mean, if you think about, particularly in schools in the UK, when it's summer and it's Ramadan and it's fasting, there's a number of schools that report the children, they can't concentrate, they have headaches, they're fatigued. Some of them actually just pass out, faint in class. And there's some conversations, or some people saying, well, if you force them to drink and eat, then it's Islamophobic, and others saying, no, it's not. And I mean, it could lead into a conversation that's quite interesting, and a conversation I think is very much worth having.
I think the conversation around what happens with children is one that crosses, all, belief systems, in particular religious, obviously, just as you've pointed out, whether it's the Muslim with Ramadan or the Jehovah's Witnesses not allowing blood transfusions. Those really should, well, particularly the blood transfusion, that really should, and I'm hoping and assuming that it is a criminal offense. And this is the problem. People often say, you know what, people all have their own beliefs. We should allow other beliefs, etc. And to a degree, it's fine what people believe to a point. But unfortunately, beliefs have got consequences, and people act on their beliefs, just as you've rightly said there.
Well, the point of it comes. I mean, it's sort of like the old adage about freedom of speech. I mean, here in the UK, obviously we're a free country, we're a democratic country, we have freedom of speech. But like, where does freedom of speech end? Does it have limits? Like, does your right to self-expression have a limit? And the obvious answer to that is yes, it does. Your right to free speech, your right to express yourself, ends where another person's rights begin. Or, to put it in a very simple way, your right to swing your fist ends at my face.
Yeah, but that's different to freedom of speech. You're talking about freedom of action versus freedom of speech. I agree that freedom
Well,
of
this comes
action.
into it. Well, this really does come into it. I mean, for one thing, if you think of particularly in places of work and employment, where Muslims kick up a fuss because they feel that such and such goes against their religion, and their religion actually interferes with their job. And so, I mean, a lot of people nowadays seem to think that they have a perfectly valid point, or I think this is bullshit. In your private life, your personal religious beliefs are your business. If it actually starts to impact on your work, then it becomes your employer's business.
Yes, and of course, and I'm very clear to make a distinction between organizations, institutions, and the public sphere or the public square, let's call it. So in the public square, freedom of speech is almost absolute in my view, apart from, as I say, inciting direct violence. And again, there needs to be a fairly high threshold. If you say, I wish I could go and kill the prime minister, that's not necessarily going to fit in. But if there was some way that you could
just had a
prove that
flash
you
of Madonna
actually incited it, that's a different story. But when you talk about freedom of action, I think that's a different thing, but people act on their beliefs, and so obviously we believe a lot of things that we don't act on. But the moment you act on something or fail to act on something, in the case of children, then I think you should be held accountable, and that's why, I'm not. It's not okay for people just to have their own beliefs, because oftentimes people will act on the beliefs either today or tomorrow. They don't act on all of them, but they act on some of them, and some of them are deadly, like you're talking about with the blood transfusion, or potentially harmful, like sending young children to school, Ramadan, not being able to eat or drink for, let's say, particularly in summer here in the UK, for maybe, I don't know, 14 to 16 hours. That is not good for somebody, particularly over 30 days. They don't have a choice in these sort of things, and so these things are actively harmful. And so, and somebody saying in the comments there, one of our Muslim guests is saying, if a Muslim cannot fast in Ramadan, he can stop fasting. Well, Sharif, I'd be interested to know who that is. Does that apply to children, and to what age? And what if a child, let's say of age 10 or 12, decides that they're feeling, unhealthy or unfit or, not in good health? Can they stop? At what point is there? What's the limit there for that?
Well, just to be fair to, what is it, Sharif? Just to be fair to Sharif, there's no consensus on this at all. I mean, particularly if you're in a country in, let's say, Northern Europe, or Northern Canada or Alaska, where the sun pretty much doesn't set. I mean, even in the UK, the height of June is daylight for 18 hours. There are some scholars who say, no, you have to do the entire thing. Which is just absolutely ridiculous, particularly if you're so far north, like in North Finland. You've got 24-hour days, so what are you supposed to do? But then there are other scholars who say you can either do it by the closest Muslim country, which would be Turkish hours, or you do it by Medina hours, which are pretty much just 12 hours. I mean, the whole idea of Ramadan, you basically just skip lunch. And but even when it comes to children, there are some who say, well, they're children, they're growing. So, I mean, one of the things, obviously, is that it's sort of a family tradition. So there are small children who, even if their parents say, no, you're too young, they want to join in with everyone else. They actively want to. But, you got some people who say, oh, obviously children shouldn't be forced. Some who say that there's no consensus.
Well, children are still growing, so they're in the age where they need food and they have growth spurts, as my child does, and so forth. So they're not at the same developed level as an adult. So I don't think it should be. And again, we could medically test this isn't a mystery that we can do. I just want to go back to something else here, because Saracen in the questions, and I think he mistook something I said. Saracen's asking, Rob, can I ask why you think free speech should stop at hate speech? Why shouldn't hate speech be allowed? Well, I think hate speech should be allowed. So I don't know if you meant something else, but as far as I've said, I'm almost a free speech absolutist. In other words, I believe all speech should be allowed, apart from direct incitement to violence that can be proven. So if somebody says, go out and kill Mr. X and I'll put a bounty on his head, a la Salman Rushdie, that should be that should not be allowed. But virtually anything else.
Well, I'm fairly certain if I question you about that, I'm fairly certain if I question you about that, you would revise your stance.
How would I revise my stance? Go ahead.
Okay.
I'm happy to revise it if there's a circumstance.
Okay. Well, what about forgery, false impersonation? Should that be a legal matter? I mean, say someone's like forged your name on a bank form or a check. Okay, what about perjury? What about slander? What about libel? What about false impersonation?
Okay, good. So let me reiterate, because I did say it earlier, but it might.
I told you.
No, it's fine. You won't get me to recant on that, but I'm happy to recant or to take an exception if there is one. So let me make it clear again. What I mean by free speech is in the public sphere. Let's call it speaker's corner. So there you can you can say basically anything. And when I say, as in you can verbally open your mouth and words can come out and you can basically say anything. Now you're talking about criminal acts. And those are in a bank, which is an institutional organization. So, of course, that doesn't fall under the free speech rubric that I'm talking about. Free speech is, can you say anything that you want to say without fear of recrimination? And as far as I'm concerned, and there could be an exception, but as far as I'm concerned, apart from direct incitement to violence, you can say anything in speaker's corner. I'll use that as the example because that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about banks or schools or private institutions or companies where there is a restriction on free speech, which is potentially understandable. I'm talking about the public sphere. So if you can find me an example that, again, I'm happy to make an exception. But as a general rule, I'm happy to go with everything is allowed apart from direct incitement to violence in the public sphere, in speaker's corner as an example. But if you've got an example, feel free to give it, and I'm happy to recant or to take that as an exception if there is such a thing. But the things that you mentioned there wouldn't fall under that as far as I can see.
So if I showed up dressed like a soldier and said that I've spent 5 years fighting for this country in Afghanistan. Look, I've even got some medals which I bought on eBay, and I tried passing myself off as a member of the armed forces. Like, you don't think that the military should be able to sue me for falsely passing myself off as a serviceman?
Well, it depends what you mean by falsely. If he's dressed exactly like a serviceman, if there's an intention to do so, there may be something against the law. I would still err on the side of he's unable to do free speech. If you can, I suppose the law could say, and I would be interested in what if there is something like that could say there's an intent here to do something criminal. But I would still err on the side of free speech. So my initial response to be yes. He should be entitled to come there, and if he's proven wrong, if he's doing something illegal, i.e., he's going, okay, give me money because I was in Iraq or something, that's obviously a criminal offense. So he's entitled to the free speech. Is that actually a criminal offense, though?
Is it actually a criminal offense if I say, oh, I've just come back from fighting to keep you safe while you're asleep, and I've fallen on hard times, so you want to put anything in the cup?
I'm not sure in this country. It may well be. I know in South Africa it was a criminal offence to impersonate a soldier with the intention of profiting in some way. But again, yeah, I would be okay with somebody coming there in a uniform and saying I'm a soldier. Again, if one can prove that's not the case, you could show him to be a liar, in which case, it's fine. There's certain cases, I will grant you, there's certain cases where somebody could say something under the free speech rubric that could cause negative consequences. But then that's why we have a law for that, is that if there is a negative consequence from freedom of speech, then there's a potential for you to be, tried for that. I'll give you an example.
Let's say that it hit the papers and your face was all over the media, and it said, Rob, an immigrant from South Africa, has done X, Y, Z, none of which is true. Would you feel would you feel that you should be able to sue that newspaper?
Yes, but that doesn't mean they can't have freedom of speech.
Well, it does if you're suing them.
Yeah, say again.
Well, it kind of does if you're suing them.
Well, if they are spreading falsities about me that will in some way negatively impact my reputation, let's say, then there's certainly a case for that. That doesn't mean they can't have freedom of speech. Again, we all want people to be
well, are you in favor or against libel laws or slander laws?
I would err on the side of being against libel or slander laws, unless you can prove it to a degree. I think it's taken far too far in this country. But again, we're talking a difference from freedom of speech to the consequences of saying certain things, and that's blurring the line with the law. So
Well, no, because media outlets, by and large, are actually trusted to be reliable. I mean, there's even such thing as the journalist creed, the journalist code. It's actually similar to the Hippocratic oath that doctors famously take.
what
And
is?
pardon?
What is? Sorry.
You know, our doctors famously are known for taking the Hippocratic oath.
Yeah.
Well, there's a similar oath or creed supposed to be upheld by journalists, which is sort of the journalist equivalent of the Hippocratic oath.
If there was, I think that's been thrown out, 10, 15, 20 years ago. I don't trust the mainstream media very much. I think you've got a lot more chance of getting it from, quote, alternative news, but then again, you have to filter that with fake news. So, we're in that unfortunate time now where you've got to be quite careful if like what happened in Westminster, they're all going to broadcast that. It's very unlikely that didn't happen. As to specifics of that and how they then swing that's a different story. But just because it's the BBC or CNN or whatever the case is, I think there's plenty of examples of these news organizations not being entirely unbiased. And so I think one has
this actually relates in a way to what I was mentioning earlier, about this idea of Muslims demanding this and that, which is sort of common in our media digest. The interesting thing is, if you look into a lot of these stories, you actually find that a lot of the time this is not the case. A lot of the time it tends to be non-Muslims, particularly white middle class, quote unquote liberal. They're not liberals. I'm a liberal. They're just twats. But it's amazing how often you get these stories that are anti-Islam that have nothing to do with Islam at all. I mean, just off the top of my head, I remember a story about a woman who was told to stop breastfeeding a child under the justification it would offend Muslims or could offend Muslims. And, the woman who was feeding a child was understandably angry about this. It hit the papers. People were reacting quite negatively to this. I actually looked into the story. No one had even asked a Muslim. And Muslims were actually really pissed about it. I remember one Muslim commenting, saying, like, this is absolutely ridiculous. Like, do people think that Muslim mothers don't feed their children? I remember another one. It was a city. I think it was Birmingham. Don't quote me on that. But it was a city in the UK where, the council had decided to not call Christmas Christmas, to make it like to sort of do away with mention of Christmas, so as not to offend Muslims and be inclusionary and shit. And again, it hit the papers. Oh, Christmas cancelled because of Muslims. Cue the outrage. And it was hundreds of Muslims that marched in protest against this, saying, we don't give a shit if people want to celebrate Christmas. No one asked us. Stop making us look bad. And I remember another story. There was this Muslim bloke from, I think, Egypt or somewhere like that. And I think this was in Bradford. And he basically went to the council and said, oh, in the local shopping centre, I want you to install a special Muslim toilet, which is basically a hole in the ground, which turned into the unhygienic mess you can imagine, because it's a fucking hole in the ground. There's shit and piss everywhere. And I actually went online on some Islamic forums. Every single Muslim I saw commenting was just going on about how ridiculous it was. But again, no one asked. It's just, it really is incredible how often you look at these Muslim scare stories, and when you actually look into it, it's got fuck all to do with Muslims. It's just non-Muslims taking it upon themselves. But it kind of reminds me of that thing that happened a while ago in the US, whereas like a shitload of people went on about how offensive and racist the Washington Redskins were. And then like they actually polled actual Native Americans, and 9 out of 10 didn't even give a shit.
Yeah, I remember that. And you're right. It's the councils and certain what we would now call regressive or far left fascist liberals. So that doesn't include you, obviously. That are trying to bend over backwards.
I call myself a liberal in spite of these people.
Yeah, I mean, potentially more of what a liberal would have been some years back, but it's certainly, the pendulum has swung, to a fascistic degree. So if Hitler was far right, you can now see his equivalent on the far left, basically, and you can see them running around doing that. But that's the problem with being, quote, in a sense, too far left in liberal. You are now anticipating what you think people might be offended for. And as a couple of Muslims on the chat were saying here, you know, this is nothing to do with us. And they're quite right.
Yeah, that's just what I
They didn't
said.
ask for
You
it.
look into these stories, most of the time, it's nothing to do with Muslims. They get the blame for it, but it's nothing to do with them. It's really not. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is. But it's like, I would say 7 times, maybe 8 times out of 10. When you look at these stories, it's not.
But it's the councils and it's government institutions and organizations that are so petrified of being
Just
called
so
Islamophobic
desperate.
or something like that, that they're now trying to anticipate so people don't get offended. You need
And yet
to
we
be
never do
okay
this
with
with
being
others.
offended. It's an objective illusion. Once people, what everybody needs is these people that get offended, they need to be educated. That offense is a personal thing that you take. It doesn't affect anybody else. And it's got this underlying insidious nature that says, oh, well, because I feel X, Y, and Z, then somebody else needs to change their thoughts or behavior. It's one of the most insidious things that
no one
are out
ever
there.
does this for any other group. No one does it for atheists. No one does it for Christians. No one does it for Jews. No one does it for Hindus. No one does it for Buddhists. No one does it for Jainists.
It's not just Muslims, though. It is in the social sphere now. If you look at universities and other things, I know we go a little bit off topic, but people are starting to bring in this whole offense thing now into higher education and other places, be it race, be it other things. And I agree that most,
we seem to have this idea that words are the insulting words are the equivalent to physical violence.
Yeah.
They seem to think it's almost like, to them, saying I don't like you is exactly the same as punching you in the face, which is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah,
but I think particularly when it comes to religion and talking about wanting to cater to Muslims, I think it's because of this idea of, like, when people talk about minority religions, they talk about race at the same time. You know, if anyone does like race or race and religion and Islamophobia, racism. I mean, while we have words for things like sexist, racist, we do not have the religious equivalent of that word. You know, there's no word for like what is racism? It's discrimination and prejudice based on a person's race or ethnic makeup. What is sexism? It's discrimination based on a person's sex or gender. What is the religious equivalent? We don't have one.
No, well, obviously religion is an idea or an ideology, whereas other things are tangible things, be it a race, a color, whatever the case is. They should all be allowed in freedom of speech, and we should defeat them with opposing views. They shouldn't.
I think that like Islamophobia is a term that I actually find very problematic.
Of course, it should be outlawed.
I mean, the really interesting thing is if you look at when people criticize Christianity or they criticize Judaism, and you look at how people react to that versus how they look at reactions to Islam. One of the things I remember was it was this debate Richard Dawkins was having with the chief rabbi of London. And Richard Dawkins was criticizing the Torah, the Old Testament, and he was just talking about the text. That's all it was. And the rabbi accused him of being anti-Semitic, and the entire room burst out laughing. He's not talking about Jewish people. He's not talking about human beings. He's talking about a fairy tale. And everyone just knew that's fucking ridiculous. But you say Islamophobia because it's so linked in with identity. It's like, oh, see, when the Qur'an says such and such, I actually do find certain verses problematic. You're Islamophobic. And you look at the reaction of the audience. It's like, I mean, if you've got a problem with Muslims, just say you're anti-Muslim. You know, don't say Islamophobia because it confuses. It confuses criticism of a text, criticism of words, with criticism of actual human beings. And I mean, people always talk about how religion has power, but again, you look at criticism of the first two Abrahamic religions, and you say, "Oh, you're anti-Semitic or you're against Christians," you're laughed out of the room. Criticize Islam, you're Islamophobic. Well, I mean, I mean, people talk about our words have power, but Jesus Christ, how thick do you have to be?
Yeah, well,
of course,
it's mostly
is constantly parroted. So,
how is it a phobia to oppose a fascist ideology? I just don't get it.
It's the bigot. It's almost like bigoted low expectations. So the people on the left,
bigotry of low
you know, they go, oh, these poor people, they don't know any better. That's how some of the left, the far left, see it. These poor people, Reza Aslan is a perfect example. These sort of people see Muslims incorrectly, clearly, because there's some very intelligent Muslims, no doubt about it, but they see them as these sort of backward people in the Middle East. They don't know any better. Therefore, we need to treat them specially. Otherwise, they're liable to have their feelings hurt, in which case they might riot. No, we need to help educate them and bring them into the 21st century, those that aren't here, and say to them, hey, you've got to get used to your feelings being hurt, or ideally get over it, because it's just an illusion. You haven't yet evolved in your psychological makeup. You haven't been taught that it's just an illusion. You think it's real. Just get some education. I can teach people this. I can unpack the entire psychological process that happens when you hear something, you take it in. There's a whole process, and I could visually do it. Maybe I should do it on a show to educate people on what happens when you get input into your ability to take information in, and what happens and how you filter it, and then what, you know, the effects that it has on you. It all happens instantaneously, so people erroneously think, oh, I'm being offended. No, there's a whole process that you unpack over a period of time that you can show. All obviously happens in a millisecond, but you can unpack and show what actually happens. And when you do that, then of course it shows that you can choose to feel offended or not. And once the word choose comes into it, now you have to take responsibility, and people will do anything to avoid that. You know, especially those that aren't psychologically educated will avoid that at any cost. You know, you can't trump my feelings. Well, you're only feeling that way because you don't know any better. And education will help you.
It's not just that, though. Just coming back to what I said about looking beyond the headlines and researching this. I mean, there are some cases where what you've said is spot on, and it's depressing how often that is. But it's not always the case. I mean, if you think of, do you remember that controversy over Danish cartoons?
Yeah, I don't think anybody will forget that.
The people who stirred that up did everything they could to actually get Muslims in Denmark riled up. They didn't care. They failed. They had to actually go to the Middle East and piss off people there to actually get a reaction in Denmark. The Danish Muslims originally didn't give a shit. But this goes both ways as well. I mean, even Muslims get taken in by this. I've been talking, I remember a few times when this whole thing about, Denmark has banned halal. And I've spoken to Muslims who honestly believe this. And I'm like, you do realize that's not true, right? And they were like, oh, what do you mean? And I said, no, they didn't ban halal. They just said that you have to stun them. We're not giving you an exception to animal welfare laws. And obviously, there are some Muslims who say, well, we are banning halal because stun meat isn't halal. But like most Muslims I spoke to were like, oh, that is halal. But then you do get some situations where it is true. I mean, like if you think of Germany a couple of years ago, there was a Muslim family who took their small infant son to be circumcised. And he actually got infected. And this actually happens a lot in the Middle East and America. It's not unheard of. There are a few hundred cases per year in each country where the baby either dies or they don't have a dick. It gets infected and they end up having to cut it off to save their life. They don't have a penis. And a couple of years ago in Germany, there was a Muslim family who took their infant son to be circumcised, and he actually died. He ended up dying he ended up dying as a result. And so there was this controversy in Germany, and they were actually talking about banning it until you were an adult and legally able to decide for yourself. And then was a load of Muslims talking about Islamophobia. There were Jews freaking out, saying they'd have to convene a Jewish council to deal with this. But even that sort of also relates in a way to what you were saying about when it comes to religious belief in children.
Yep. I mean, welcome, Sarazin. Welcome to the chat.
All right, mate.
Hi. Hello, everyone.
How you doing?
Good. Thank
Quick
you.
question
Sorry, I'm
for
going to
you,
be
Saracen.
really quick today.
Okay, no worries.
I'm on babysitter duty. So.
Oh dear. Okay. I just wanted to check in with you. Lamb of God said, "Can you break down your addressing of Ali for us, Sarazin?" Were you addressing him in some way?
I don't get it. No, sorry, I've missed.
Ali, what like Ali Dawah or
Ali Dawah.
Oh yeah. So basically, what happened with Ali Dawah, as you know, I'm against essentializing Islam. I'm against saying Islam is one thing and saying that basically my opinion is the only opinion. I believe there's many pluralistic opinions within Islam, and music being one of them. So also one of the things that I don't like is when people say asking the Prophet, peace be upon him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for intercession is idol worship. Now that's never been the case for many centuries, and I think it's a very bigoted view. He believed that, and so what happened was I watched this video of him speaking.
Sorry. Ali Dawah believed
Yes.
in praying to the Prophet for miracles.
No, I believe that.
You believed in that?
Yeah, I believe that. So basically, Ali
Like,
Dawah
you don't
said,
believe it now. You used to believe that.
no, I still believe it.
You believe in praying to Muhammad for miracles.
I don't believe in praying as such. I believe in intercession.
Asking him to pay.
But yeah,
Wait, so when you say intercession, you mean like, Muhammad, can you pass this on to Allah?
yes, exactly. Yeah, because
So like
because,
Catholics and
yeah,
saints.
well, yeah, our belief is quite similar to Catholics in the sense that we believe it was one message of God. We don't believe the people are. We believe they're physically dead, but we don't believe they're spiritually dead. So we believe that they're in the world of the barzakh, which is the intermediate world. But anyway, that's a complicated thing. But the point was, he said a few things like that, and he said quite a few things about Islam says this and the Prophet says this, and I just had enough. Anyway, I was listening to a debate with him and Sarah, and
Were you actually in Speaker's Corner at the time?
yes, yeah, I was in the.
Oh, was that the
Speaker's Corner.
video of you where you were having a go at him?
Exactly, yeah.
Gotcha.
So I said to him, look, mate, you don't speak for us. I find you embarrassing. If you are to speak, fine, speak. But don't say it's for Islam. Don't say this is the only way. And admit when you don't know. Listen to other people's arguments. They could be right. Don't have a premeditated speech ready. And I just find that a lot of the Muslims in Speaker's Corner are they just go there and they're just going to back the Muslim right or wrong. And I think this is the wrong approach. Like, hey, you guys know me now. I've been on here a few weeks. I'm perfectly willing to listen to your arguments. If they've got credit, if they've got mileage in them, I'll listen to them. I'll take them on board. If they haven't, I'll challenge you, and likewise. And I think that's the correct way to be. I just feel that otherwise it's just immature, and people are just doing it for YouTube hits or to build a profile, and that's what I take issue with.
Yeah,
Speaking personally for myself, I mean, obviously I'm not talking for anyone else. I'm talking purely for me. My impression of you, you seem like a really decent person. I mean, you seem like exactly the kind of person that I'd enjoy the company of in real life.
Likewise.
Oh, and by the way, I will actually point this out. Looking at your YouTube channel, next time you're in Nottingham, mate, hit me up. We'll hang out.
Most definitely, it'd be great.
I think there's a lot of ego going on in Speaker's Corner, and you're right there. There's some Muslims that don't listen anymore. Ali Dawah's one, and the problem with Ali, bless him, he's not here. Is that he's just not intellectually up to the task. So when he brings an argument that he's learned parrot fashion and then he's probed by that, the intellect escapes him. So he's got a few get out of jail or escape sentences that he uses, and he did it with you, of course. So he's not willing to answer something, and so he'll just repeat something or say something that sidetracks it. So of course he's not a good example, as you rightly pointed out, but he's got 100,000 subscribers, and because he's loud and brash, and unfortunately I see it in the comments in my YouTube channel and others as well, some Muslims think this is just a game and it's like a schoolyard fight in the back of a schoolyard.
Right,
and they're entitled to their views, but those are not the sort of people that I really want to interact with.
No,
I'm looking for truth.
Preaching to the choir, though. It's telling people what they want to hear. I remember back in the early days of Dawah Man, he had like no fucking subscribers whatsoever. And then a couple of years ago, he had this bright idea of going up to Christmas decorations in London because it was Christmas, so all like fairy lights. And he just started singing, like jumping up and down like the little muppet he is. He was going, "We wish you a Merry Shirkmas. We wish you a Merry Shirkmas." And then as soon as he did that video, his fucking subscribers exploded.
Well, this is the thing. The Muslims definitely feel, and I think to some degree I can sympathize with this. Muslims definitely feel that they are under siege.
Some.
I'm quite self-confident in my belief. I'm quite confident in what I believe. And I think it's when you're not confident, and then you've got these clowns, and this is what I'm against, because you've got these clowns that come along and they will just talk and they say we're speaking for Islam, and naive people follow them, and it makes our religion look like a joke. You know, and like Rob said, we've got some very smart people. Like, I'll be honest with you, I think Mansour is smart, and I know you might disagree with me, Rob, but I think
I do. I disagree
you know,
100%.
maybe, but I mean, out of all of the people I've seen speak this corner, I think at least he can rationalize, he can produce things. I like people like Mansour. I don't like people like Ali Dawah or Dawah Man or Adnan Rashid, who are just loudmouths. And like you said, Rob, you know, they're not sound. They haven't researched things. Rather than say I don't know, they will just carry on and it's just a show, you know. And that's not what the spirit of Speaker's Corner is. And that's why I'm so against that.
And I think
Sorry,
it's
who are you talking about when you say Mansour? Because when you said Mansour originally, I thought you were talking about Dawah Man, because that's his name, innit?
No, not him. Mansour. I think his name is
Wasn't it
Mansour.
Imran Ibn Mansour? That's
No,
his name.
not him. I think he's a joke. That's Dawah Man.
He was a joke.
Rob can probably explain. I've only been to Speaker's Corner a few times, but Mansour is he's an intelligent young man. He speaks sense from what I can see, you know, and he breaks down arguments. So, for example, today when you guys were talking about the sperm and the Big Bang Theory, I'll be honest with you, I'm out of my element. I can't answer that. That's something I don't have like much knowledge of, so I wouldn't engage in that. But someone like Mansour would be able to probably do a much better, well, would do a better job than me and stuff. So yeah, I mean,
yeah, Mansour's been going for about, he told me, I think, about 20 years, give or take. I can't imagine somebody's been going to Speaker's Corner that long. I hope I don't, but maybe I will. Who knows? But I've also seen him make the same mistakes and stuff. And of course, what I notice, and maybe it happens for me and for other people as well, you know, I don't want to say it doesn't happen for me. It could well happen for me as well. But when I notice there's inconsistencies depending on who they're speaking to, and I'm not talking about coming down to somebody's level because they don't understand something. I'm talking about if they were speaking to me or to let's say Phil, or to, you know, TDS Dave, if he pops down there, or, you know, somebody else that's done a little bit of research. I'm by no means, you know, that good. There's much better, cleverer people than me. So when they speak to those sort of people, then there's a different conversation. When they speak to people that they either don't know or they presume is not well read, or, you know, very clued up, then they revert to the old things that they would never dream of doing in front of me or other people, because they know. And I saw it, and I'm not going to mention his name on here, but I saw that happen with somebody in Speaker's Corner. I watched the video, and he was educated by Phil in one of the videos on my channel about the cosmos. What did he do? And I thought, actually, I thought reasonably highly of him, in the sense that, you know, he's normally fairly okay at Speaker's Corner. Then I saw him do a video with an atheist where he went back and made the same old ridiculous claims that he would never have made in front of Phil. He made with this atheist about the beginning of the universe. And I just went, do you know what? That for me, on that particular person, this isn't Mansour, it's somebody else. And I just went, you know what? I've lost a bit of respect here, because I didn't expect that from him. I would have expected that from an Ali or somebody else, but I wouldn't have expected that from him. Be consistent. If you've been educated on a particular point, don't go and then change that point and say something else again to somebody else just because you think you're not being heard on who that is. You've been explained what, you know, some of the beginnings of the universe, and you've at least appeared to accept that. Now you go back as if you've never heard that before, and you confront somebody else and come with the same tired arguments that were refuted some time back. That to me is not an honest thing. So all I'm suggesting is that, you know, just be consistent in the sense of, don't go and bring up things that because you think somebody hasn't heard it before, then you're going to bring up some old thing from the script that just kicks back in when you've been clearly educated that that's false. And that's what I'm very, you know, concerned about, that some Muslims do. So they'll speak one way to me and another way to somebody else who they don't think knows anything.
I would love to see you speak to Mansour. I'm going to be there in a couple of weeks. Hopefully, I'll hit you up.
I'll be down this
Rob.
Sunday,
Okay.
so
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
I'll get a chance.
Yeah.
And I'll happily have a conversation with him, because I particularly want to ask him about the universe, because I've updated myself a little bit more, having spoken to Phil, and I'm going to hopefully produce a few more videos with Phil next week.
Yeah, and we all learn. We all learn from it. You know, I learn from Mansour. I learn from yourself. You know, and that's the spirit of Speaker's Corner. We're there to learn, try to find the truth. You know, and then I'm going to be asked, what is the truth again? But yeah, no, I don't see those sort of debates. When I watch you, Rob, and I see Mansour, and I enjoy listening to them. What I don't like is just brashness and ego, and, you know, subscribe to my channel, blah blah blah. And I don't like that. I don't think that's the spirit of Speaker's Corner. You know, it's more just entertainment.
Yeah, but if they come that way,
If I get the chance to read out that bit about Moses I wrote, I'd love to know your opinion. But I was just wondering if we could actually take the conversation back a bit, because Rob, we were talking about free speech earlier, and I can't remember if it was last week or the week before when Abu was hosting. It actually sort of came up, and I know that Sarasan said that he's babysitting, so he's only got a limited time. But I'd really like to bring this up. For those who didn't see last show, Sarasan mentioned this idea of insulting Muhammad and insulting quote unquote sacred things. And Sarasan, I can't remember exactly what you said, but I think it was in the vein of
well, ask him. Let him
it's sort of like if a wealthy man or someone with like an income and a roof over their head, insulted a tramp and spoke shit about that tramp's mother, where they're sleeping on the street, cold, hungry, and starving, and you're there with a full belly and like a coat on your back.
Ask him a question.
Yeah,
So,
please ask me.
What is it you want him to say?
Well, the first question I had is like, considering it's like a week or two later, have you reflected on that? And if so, do you realize how ridiculous that is?
Okay,
Well,
so sorry, I didn't watch it. So bring me up to speed. What is it exactly that you?
What I said, Rob.
Basically, what I just said. Sarasan.
Okay, wait, Raven. Let him say it. Let him say it in his own words.
So what I can recall from what I said was, I don't believe in absolute free speech. I believe that people do have sensitivities, and I believe that I understand where freedom of speech comes from the Europe and the West. I completely get it. I think it comes from a different milieu compared to how it comes from in terms of where the Islamic world. I think there's a difference. I believe that in Islam we still hold things sacred. I wouldn't enforce that on anyone. I believe.
Yes, you would.
You have you have a right.
No, you would. You actually said we need more draconian laws, and you think there should be legal repercussions. Now, see, this is the thing. This is the thing.
Raven, hang on a second, please, my friend. Let me just finish, and then you carry on.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I was saying was, it goes back to what you said earlier. Why stop at inciting violence? And I was reading the comments, and I asked that comment in the comment before, because it causes harm. It can cause harm. It's the notion of harm.
No,
now,
it can't.
I believe that when you're in a society where by you saying something, someone across the world or someone in your country is going to go and do something silly, kill someone, someone's going to get hurt, or it's going to increase the terror level in your society. I think that takes precedence. And that's why I don't believe in absolute freedom of speech. I don't believe, that the Bible should be burned. I don't believe the Book of Mormon or the Bhagavad Gita or any of the Sikh books, Sikh holy books. I don't believe any of that should be burned. I think people do hold sensitivity. I think from the Western point of view, sometimes it is quite arrogant to say, you know what, we've given up religion. And ultimately, it does come back down to belief. We've given up God. Everyone else needs to just fit in and give up God. That's it. And by the way,
no one's saying that. For
Saracen,
everything you've just said, I have a problem with. Honestly, everything. I mean, the first thing, what you said about it will incite violence. I mean, the thing to understand there is, like, first of all, we're usually talking about the Middle East. These are people who live in a society. You do not have freedom. You do not have individualism. They live in a society where those in power say, "Shut the fuck up and do as you're told." I mean, if you can compare that to the Western world, do you remember years ago where Kate Middleton, who is going to be our queen, was photographed topless, and Kate Middleton's tits were all over the internet? Prince William, who is in line for the throne, he's going to be sitting on the throne. He's going to be our king. He couldn't do anything about it. There was nothing he could do. And that's what people in the Middle East don't understand. They live in a society where if something like that comes out, that's the government, that's the authority, they've okayed it. They do not realize that that is not how it is in the Western world. You can mock authority, you can mock this and mock that, and there's fuck all they can do. They don't understand that because they live in a society that is ultimately authoritarian. And where I have a huge problem, particularly with you making the comparison of not only insulting a tramp but insulting his mother. What if what if Donald Trump Jr. said the exact same thing about his dad, who is the fucking president?
I have to correct you on the tramp. I have to correct you on the tramp thing. No, no, it's fine. No.
Religious figures. Because if you were to talk shit about my mum, right? Who's my mum? Who is my mum? Have you heard of that?
So just to bring it back to what
power does my mum have? Is she in government? Is she making laws? Is she considered a prophet? Are people hanging on what she says? No. Okay. My mum is not in any position of power. If my mum was a prime minister or my mum was a queen, then she is in a position of authority and power. You would have every single right under the sun to criticize her, and the fact that she's my mum is irrelevant. And I'm sure you understand what I'm coming at with this, because it's just fucking obvious. David Cameron's kids weren't saying you can't talk about the prime minister like that because he's my dad. And by that same token, Muhammad and every other sacred holy figure is someone worshipped by millions, if not billions, of people who dedicate their lives to it, argue that we should adhere to this and that. So to say that insulting a tramp's mother is equivalent to insulting Muhammad or Jesus or Krishna or Buddha.
I think you're misquoting me, Raven. I think you're misquoting. No.
Okay, Raven. Whoa.
The thing that you absolutely
Raven, you're going on. You're going on a bit.
I will let you come in. 5 seconds. 5 seconds. And I'll let you come in. 5 seconds. One of the biggest things that you said that I disagree. 5 seconds. One of the biggest things you said that I disagreed with is you said. I think you should have more draconian laws so it doesn't infringe on my rights. And I'll say this and I'll let you come in. Hang about. I'll say this and I'll let you come in. When it comes to it, the thing is, if you talk shit about, just give me a second. It's 5 seconds and I'll let you come in.
Okay, come on, buddy.
5 seconds. If I say something about Muhammad, nothing is going to happen. Mosques are not going to crumble to ash. Qur'ans are not going to burst into flame. If I say Muhammad is such and such, nothing happens. You get a bit pissed off and then you go about your day. Nothing happens. But if I actually am told that I cannot think and speak as I see fit, that is actually going against me. I am not limiting you by slagging off Muhammad, but you are limiting me in saying that I can't.
Okay, cool. Saracen, carry on.
Yeah, so what I actually said a couple of weeks ago, I said, look, when people, let's say someone insults someone, and let's say that your reality is like you're a high-flying banker. You've just come, you've just got your bonus, Christmas bonus. You got £100,000, and then I come and I insult your mum. You're probably just gonna laugh it off. And then you see a tramp on the street who hasn't eaten, who hasn't slept for a few days. I insult him, and I insult his mum. The reaction, what I said, is going to be completely different. That was what I actually said.
Whose reaction?
I said the tramp's reaction is most likely going to be completely different to the banker if I insult his mum. Why? Because they're two different ends of the spectrum. So to use that analogy, what I said was the Muslim world, by and large, if you look at them, they are some of the most deprived people in the world. The education standards, in terms of poverty, in terms of many social, political factors. And the reality is we are living in a post-colonial time. Of course they're going to reaction. Now they've had dictators over them for so many years, and Raven is absolutely right in that the dictators, they don't live in free societies. Where I disagree with Raven is that when we say something in the West, we're now living in a global world. I don't care what Raven says, when those cartoons or wherever, and I understand people's right to say it. Don't get me wrong, I understand it. For me, I don't see it as my prophet. I just feel that you guys are drawing someone else, and I don't take it seriously anyway, because I don't think that you guys know who the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was or the Quran was. I believe you guys are ignorant of it, you know. But I'm saying if you do that, someone in Bangladesh, someone in Pakistan, someone in Egypt who is at the lower end of the spectrum is probably going to get shot, or is probably going to attack an American embassy or something. Then you've got the Islamists. We're living in a global world where you've got Islamists that are going to use that as propaganda to hate, for young people to hate the West. Now,
So you're saying basically give in to bullies?
No, I'm saying.
Yes, you are.
I'm saying that
No,
we have to
you are saying,
Raven,
flat
wait,
out,
please.
do not
finish.
I don't believe in absolutely freedom of speech. I made that perfectly clear. I think just as Rob has some standards, he stops at incitement. Why do we stop at incitement? Because it can cause harm to others. It can potentially cause a danger. The same rationale. I believe we're living in exceptional circumstances in a global world where you do something, it's going to put other people at risk. If it puts my fellow countrymen at risk, remember, I used to hang around with Anjem Chowdhury, Omar Bakri, Abu Hamza. I'm telling you, they use that as propaganda to make young people hate the West. So
that's not my problem.
Well, it would be if your family gets blown up.
Yeah, but that tramp's mum is not considered a prophet. That tramp's mum doesn't have almost 2 billion.
I think you missed an analogy.
Thinking that they should imitate that tramp's mum. No. You have to understand. Surely you understand. It's a ridiculous comparison.
No, I don't think. I am using it as an analogy from the top to the bottom.
It's a stupid analogy.
Saracen, let me ask you this question. Let me ask you this question with regards to your analogy. So you're suggesting that if somebody insulted the banker's mum who earned 100,000 or made 100,000, was a happy guy, he would be okay with it and just laugh it off. But if somebody insulted the tramp's mum who was living and the tramp was in an unfortunate situation, down on his luck, etc., he would have a different reaction. That's the point you're making, and therefore we shouldn't insult people's mothers, or what is the point of that part? Is it that some people will have a different reaction to it?
No, the point is, the reason I use that analogy is I'm showing that people at different ends of the spectrum view things in different ways. Now, for example, the Muslim world, there was a time in Spain, we spoke about this few, where there was a Christian group called the Martyrs of Cordoba who would go, and they felt helpless. So what they would do is go and insult the Prophet ﷺ. Most Muslims remain calm. But after they did it, and they would go into the mosque and burst in and insult the Prophet in the hope of becoming martyrs, And there's times in Spain, in Syria, you have Abu Nawas, who was a Muslim prophet. You have Al-Mari, who was an Arab prophet. He wrote openly blasphemous things. The Muslim civilization was a bit more civilized then. It was affluent. You could understand these things. I'm saying at this particular time in the world, we are living in those sort of circumstances where,
we're living in the Islamic Dark Age.
Perhaps we are living in a time where there's mass Muslim ignorance, and we're living in times where there is ideologies out there, and they do, and they no, I don't believe it. This is the thing. I don't believe it's Islam as such. I believe that's the problem. We essentialize Islam. And we will do a program in future shows. What is Islam? I'm absolutely happy to do that. I believe that that there are many things that aren't Muslim, and people say, "Oh, it says it in the Quran, it says it in the Sunnah." I don't believe in those literal approaches.
Okay, before you go off on that tangent, I want to bring. Oh, he's left now. I was going to bring in.
Sorry, Anton, do you want to come back? We were just about to.
He just jumped out there. He's jumped off. Saracen, I wanted to ask you a question. So, what is your solution to this? Do you think we need to lower ourselves to the lowest common denominator, or do you think we should help raise people up to the highest common denominator?
I think that given the world, that's all right, JP. Welcome, JP. I believe that we're living in exceptional circumstances. I believe at this moment in time, when I'm in a classroom, when I was a child, I went to school, I was told not to insult people, not to hurt people's feelings, and generally we had a harmonious classroom in that fit. The moment someone says something about someone's mom or someone's book or someone's religion or someone's non-religion or someone's cultural background, that caused friction. I
can't
don't,
compare them.
I don't want to live in a world where we have friction and we go around hating each other. I don't think it's progressive. I think, in fact, I think it's regressive.
You can't compare them.
I understand your point.
Compare the tramp's mum to someone who is taken
Raven, are you
word of
stoned?
God
Be
as a
honest. Are you
perfect
stoned
human
again?
being by almost 2 billion people.
Raven, just
There are entire countries that enact laws based on the words and deeds, supposedly, of this person. Who's doing that for the tramp's mum?
Can I jump in here?
You're missing it there. Hang on a sec. Who wants to jump in?
Can
I
I
want
jump in?
Antonio to come back. Sorry, Antone.
Whoever, TJ or
I think TJ wants to jump in.
So I was saying that, okay, I mean, you are definitely entitled to that opinion, but my problem is when certain individuals want to bring in the state to crack down on that. That's my problem. You can, you can have that opinion, but when you want to bring in the state to intervene in that matter, that's my problem. I think that when you bring in a gun, basically, and shut people up. I mean, that's what the state is, right? It's just a gun. So when people want to use the leverage of the state to regulate speech, that's when, that's where I have a problem. So I think that, that's your opinion, but my question would be, would you want the federal government to come in and make a call on that? That would be my question.
Yeah, and to answer your question directly, I believe that the government have got the biggest duty a government has to do is to keep its citizens safe. I believe that's the first and fundamental duty. Now, in an ideal world, TJ, I believe everyone should be allowed to say what they want to feel, especially in the West. Not, in the Muslim world, I think we're dealing with a whole kettle of it. I believe in the West, in an ideal situation, yes, but unfortunately, we're living in a situation where there's going to be people that are going to blow themselves up by things like that. There's going to be people at risk. It's going to cause hatred. So yes, I believe that we do have hate. Hate speeches. We don't have absolute freedom of speech. We have certain restrictions. It is arbitrary, and I believe that's the government to make those rules.
Saracen, I heard you equivocate a little bit with your school when you were at school, the sort of analogy at school, that it was all fine and dandy at school. Remember, that's not necessarily an analogy that we're talking about. When I talk about free speech, and we need to be clear that we're talking about the same thing. I'm talking about it in the public sphere, and I specifically state Speaker's Corner. Schools, institutions, organizations, government bodies, those are different things, and we shouldn't equate those. But even going back to your school, yes, it was harmonious. Number one, you were children, so you obviously potentially were not fully developed. But B, they kept the peace there with equivocation. So the equivocation between a book being important and your mother being important, I think, is fallacious. One is a person, one is a book. It's just words on a page. And so my question is still to you, should we lower ourselves to the lowest common denominator? And who is that? If we do lower ourselves and we go, okay, we're not going to say something that offend somebody. We're seeing it at the moment, and we're seeing it in universities in the US and the UK, not just about religion, but about other things. There's never an end point here. There's never a point where somebody goes, do you know what? It's okay now. Now we can say anything. This is the lowest point. There's always somebody who's going to be offended by something, and so the bar keeps getting lowered and lowered and lowered. And so my question to you is still, where should we lower the bar to? Who's the common denominator, and where do we stop? Where we go, okay, now anything below this, we can still say. The problem is, practically speaking, that we will never get there.
I think you're missing the target with your question.
How so?
I've been thinking about this whole week, about how people have sometimes a level of stress, a level of hate within them. And it manifests into an action, and the action usually takes the form of whatever the culture you've imbibed yourself in. For example, the guy on the bridge who ran over the people, he was an angry young man. He became a Muslim. It was the Muslim attitude of ISIS which inspired him to drive over people. Now, if you take that as a concept from beginning to end, a thought process of how he learn a religion tells him to do things in a certain manner to certain people, he reacts and does it, and then bring that to your tramp and your versus Muhammad and insulting, you'll see that really, both Trump and Mohammed have exactly the same level of feelings of being upset, but one person is revered more than the other because a book tells you so. Do you
Sorry,
understand?
what's your point there, GP? I'm sorry, I'm not with you. What is the point there?
It's saying that you're looking at the problem from the wrong view, the wrong stance, from a wrong angle.
Who I am or Saracen?
This whole conversation has been.
Okay, how should we look at it?
What has inspired an emotion to trigger into something else, an action, a reaction?
Remember, we're talking about free speech. So, are you
Yes,
related?
we're talking about free speech and how is what defines free speech? A common consensus. The five of us here have agreed that free speech among the five of us will be permitted on certain formats, and we decide what those formats are from our different cultures. I'm English, therefore I was brought up the Essex way, and everybody has a right to opinion. But if somebody came from America, they have a slightly more liberal view of free speech, and they would allow hate speech, which I've been brought up as thinking as not permissible, because you shouldn't go out of your way to upset people when you don't have to.
So what's your solution then? Mine is allow all speech apart from direct incitement to violence. What would be your solution?
I think we have to start looking at what triggers the bad reactions. What causes a man to lose their temper? What causes a man to insult somebody else? I don't think it just comes from a void. I think it's a form of social acceptance that if you get angry, this is the way you must behave. For example, when you look at the countries abroad where they have very strong religious views, it is usually traced back to something in the literature, something the priest tells them every week in their local congregation. You must behave this way if they insult your book. You must attack all the Americans because they are not one of us. You must hate all the Jews. It's always traced back to this is the way you have to behave when a set of circumstances arise.
And so what you're suggesting, if I understand you correctly, is that we should take into consideration people from other cultures and we should then lower our standards. In other words,
not at all.
We should not have absolute free speech.
Not at all. Not at all. You've heard you yourself, I think, said a while ago you have heard of neuro-linguistic programming.
Yeah.
Welcome. You've just listened to 101 in it. That is neuro-linguistic programming.
I like that.
Not quite. I mean, you've missed it slightly. It depends what you mean or what you're attributing. Neuro-linguistic program, one of the tenets is the meaning of communication is the response you get. No, that's got nothing to do with free speech.
No, neuro-linguistic programming can be used by someone like me to program you to behave in certain ways which are against your normal behavior. Or
give me an example. I'm quite familiar with neuro-linguistics. So give me an example. What do you mean?
Every time you say a word that I particularly like, every time you do a reaction I like, I could touch you on the shoulder. That will release endorphins into your brain, which will give you a pleasurable response and make you want to do it again.
Yes, that's dog training, isn't it? Though
you've got anchoring, you've got hypnosis, etc.
I can't hear the both of you.
Sorry, that's like dog training, though, isn't it? It's like if you have a dog, every time it does something that you're happy with, you give it a treat. Every time it does something you don't like, you squirt it with water in the face.
Yes, and also with linguistic programming, it's a little bit more like taking what you hold as a perception as to be a reality and saying, well, it's not really a reality, therefore you shouldn't react the way that you just have. That goes on to what they call it,
but also when
therapy.
But also when it comes to doing things that are against your nature, I'm assuming that everyone here, well, not everyone might be. There was an experiment, I think it was back in the 30s or the 50s. This is when psychiatry was still very new. It was still a young field, and you could never do it nowadays. We've got too many laws and rules in psychiatry about ethics, so you could never do it now. But back in the day, psychiatrists did an experiment where they got ordinary, just ordinary, normal members of the public, and they put them in a room with people dressed in different ways, and they put them in front of some buttons, and through a window screen there was an actor, and every time they pushed a button, a light would come on telling the actor how to behave. And you know, the people thought that they were shocking him with different levels of electrical volts. So sometimes he'd just go like, ah, and other times he'd be screaming his head off in absolute agony, like he was being tortured by the devil himself.
Yeah, that's
what people actually found was that when it was just people in street clothes who looked like them telling them what to do, they were like, no, fuck you. But when they were dressed in lab coats, when they were figures of authority, when they were authority figures, they would actually press the button, and the actor would see this light, and he'd pretend to scream and writhe. And there were people who, even as they were doing it, they were breaking out in tears, sobbing.
They did,
but they keep on doing it. And the interesting thing is, after this had happened, Raven, a lot of the people.
Raven, they didn't do it to people of authority figures that they didn't recognise. For example, they might have put a Catholic priest there, and the reaction they got was what you have read about.
No.
But they wouldn't put an imam there and get the same reaction, because they wouldn't
the people telling them what button to push.
Guys, I'm gonna have to go.
Authority figures, like they were wearing lab coats.
Have a nice night.
And the people who did this, you know, I mean,
Saracen, thanks for your time. Come again next Sunday. Hopefully.
Rob, can I quickly just ask you, just because I wasn't able to get an answer earlier, is why do you think it should stop at hate speech? Sorry, guys, I know you guys can carry on after. I'm just going to literally be 2 minutes. I just want to know why you think it should stop at incitement. Why shouldn't incitement be allowed in the society?
Why not incitement? All I said was incitement to violence. So something that's directly where somebody says, let's go and kill Mr. X, and I will put a bounty on his head, like the Salman Rushdie thing. That should be banned. That's the only sort of free speech should be banned, because now there's going to be people who are directly going to go and kill him, and he can't stop that. That's the difference. He is helpless to stop that, in the sense that if he carries on in the world and he doesn't have any protection, he'll be killed. So that's the only freedom of speech that I would put a stop to. Somebody that directly incites violence. Everything else we can defeat with better speech.
I agree. I agree, but is that because it could cause harm?
Yes, that's direct physical harm to somebody who is not able to stop that.
But would you not say?
But you didn't commit the crime.
Would you not say though? So someone we know, cartoons, for example, whether they should or not is separate thing. But we know that when cartoons are published or things are published, we know it's going to cause harm to people. We know people are going to be attacked. Innocent Jews or innocent Christians or innocent Muslims are going to die somewhere for story.
Excuse me, but cartoons, sticks and stones will break your bones. No.
I just want to hear Rob's response to that, please.
You've had a response just from me. And it's the same.
I accept that, JP. I just want to understand.
It's the same as Rob. Sticks and stones will break your bones, but cartoons will
But it goes back to the harm issue, Rob. So, I mean, I just want to know.
Yeah, but the difference there is, Saracen, the difference there is that that's just a psychological condition that can be educated. You can't educate Salman Rushdie in any way to protect himself from direct incitement to violence. So the fact that people are running what I would call ancient software on their brains, like MS-DOS, where the rest of us are running Windows 10 or Mac OS, people are running MS-DOS on their brains. All it needs is a software upgrade. And so we don't lower ourselves because somebody might be offended by something. We help educate those people that they're delusional, that them feeling offended is just a software program running on their brain that they can be educated out of. It's a very simple.
But we can educate those people not to attack Salman Rushdie then by saying virtue, right? Because surely the people who should. Go on.
It's not the same thing, because Salman. Remember, we're talking about the victim or the potential victim. Salman Rushdie is a potential victim. Your man, let's say in Pakistan, is not the potential victim in the same way, because all that has to happen, I would go there. If he was open to it, I would explain to him, I'd unpack it, I'd show him in half an hour. If he said, Rob, help me, I don't want to feel offended by this nonsense. If he was open to that, or even thought it was nonsense, I could educate anybody out of their offense if they were open to hearing it. I can't educate Salman Rushdie out of something. to protect himself from potential people who want to kill him?
I think that's I would say that's a bit naive. I think we're dealing with people who do lack intelligence, who are completely emotive, who are going to do it, and we're living in that time of the world. And this is my point about absolute freedom of speech. It is the governments that do decide. We have hate speeches, we have terrorism laws, we have laws against the Holocaust, etc.
All of those are wrong.
No,
That's wrong.
no, we don't.
No, but what I'm saying,
Hang back.
it's because of
See,
the protection
stop.
for society.
Let him
Now,
finish,
the
Raven.
first points you made were actually good because they actually directly harm or involve individual people. The other point you made, we have laws against the Holocaust. That doesn't actually harm anyone. And also, the UK does not have that. Some European countries do. Germany has it, for instance. If you deny the Holocaust or do the Sieg Heil, that is illegal. But the UK does not have those laws.
I think we should have Holocaust laws, by the way.
Well, I absolutely disagree with you.
Yeah, I think we should. I know it's a lot of Muslims probably disagree with
So
me.
you think we should have laws saying that you cannot disagree with the current consensus of historical events?
I think
What's
that
wrong with you?
because I think the Jewish community has been a community that's been persecuted in a way that perhaps no other community has been persecuted.
The Jewish community
and it's there is mass
Raven, dude,
anti-Semitism.
Raven, please let somebody finish.
I believe there's so much anti-Semitism, and I believe that there are a small community, and they usually do get the brunt of violence where there's anti-Semitism. And for example, what happened in Germany is a classic example. Unfortunately, anti-Semitism is even on the rise in our country at the moment.
Well, that's mostly from Muslims.
It is. I probably agree with that. And I think it's wrong.
Is, though, if you talk about the Holocaust, you've got to understand the context of this. I mean, for the past 2,000 years, the Jewish people, as a ethnic group, as a religion, have been fucked over. In the Christian world, they've been fucked over because they were accused of deicide, literally the murder of
Christ
God,
killers, right.
which is incredible because the whole point of Christianity is a crucifixion. If there is no crucifixion, there is no forgiveness, there is no salvation, we're all damned to hell. So I don't know why you'd be pissed at them at that, but that's true. And in Europe, in the Christian world, there were tales of Jews breaking into churches in the middle of the night, spitting on the holy wafers, pissing in the sacred wine. And in the Muslim world, Jews were accused of being agents of Iblis, of trying to trick Muhammad, of being the descendants of Jews and pigs. The Jews have been fucked for 2,000
There's a
years,
question why
all of which culminated eventually in the Holocaust. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that. A lot of people don't realize this, but considering the Nazis were originally blessed by the Roman Catholic Church, there's only one, and I want to repeat this, one Nazi convicted of war crimes who has ever been excommunicated from the Roman Catholic Church. Do you know what his crime was? The one Nazi war criminal to be excommunicated. Do you know what his crime was?
No, we don't. Raven, can you get to the point, brother? You're on a long rant here, and nobody else can speak while you're talking.
He married a Protestant.
Okay. What's your point?
That was the crime so severe. He was the one Nazi.
He's drunk. He doesn't know what the point is.
No, I think GP is probably right. I'm going to make a move, but I just want to close. I don't believe in exceptional Muslim laws. I believe that like I said, I don't believe in absolute freedom of speech. I believe there should be laws to protect, especially those most vulnerable in society, and those are Jews, Muslims, people like that. I believe that my religion should be put to the test. I believe my religion should be put to the test, and I believe that I've got no problem challenging, and that's why I come on the show. You can challenge me, you can ask me questions.
I think what you're saying, Saracen, is you don't believe in words or sentences that trigger a reaction that you don't particularly like to see.
I just feel, JP, what I feel right now is that we're living in a globalized world where
So
something
there's going to be differences.
there is, and we can say sticks and stones, mate. And we're privileged to live in a society where there's laws, rules, regulation. We have protection. There's people in other worlds, in other parts of the world, where they're not fortunate to have that. There's demigods out there. There's people who will be attacked. So, for example, let me give you an example. Someone who draws a cartoon of the Prophet.
In the demigod.
Yeah, let's say someone draws an innocent Christian maybe killed in Egypt, for example, and that's happened before, because people on that mentality will just say, "Oh, they're all the Christians." They don't see that they're secularists. They just think, they're Christians.
Don't you see the problem is with the society they live in?
I absolutely agree with you. I 100% agree with you on that. And I think that there needs to be a collective effort to make that. But I think, unfortunately, this is a problem. And I believe that, and that's why I think it's irresponsible.
You know what the solution is? Young men like you telling your peer group over in Egypt not to behave the way that you think they shouldn't.
I do it in my mosque.
Nationalistic.
I do it, but let's be honest. Like, I look at, for example, when I spoke about Ali Dawah, and I was ostracized as being the weird Muslim who's siding with the kuffar. No. But what I'm saying, I approached him. I said, and I mentioned this earlier. Perhaps you weren't listening, GP. But I said, look, I don't agree with the way your approach is, mate. Blah blah blah. You should read the comments on Titans TV. Read the comments on the other thing.
Ali Dawah has probably suffered brain damage at birth the way he talks and behaves.
One at a time, guys.
Submoronic.
Sorry, I'm gonna just quickly conclude. And that's the sort of mentality, unfortunately, we're dealing with. We have to up the standard. I can't.
Well, we can't help who his parents marry in his genetic line, can we?
I'm not going to insult him personally, because I still think of him. I think of him as a brother. I'll be honest with you. As much as I have disagreements with him, I still think of him as a Muslim brother. I'm not going to insult him personally.
Okay, let's put Ali aside, Saracen.
Yeah, the point of what I was making was that there's people out there that, rather than listen to what I was saying, they will attack me personally. And unfortunately, the people who do speak out, like myself, like others, we just get shut down because we're up against big media. But we're going to keep on trying. And I think if enough of us do it, enough of the educated people come out there and speak up against it, we can change societies. I think we're in for a long slog. And what do we do in between?
Well, you and I can have a conversation again at some point, Saracen.
Yes, I'm sure we'll have a discussion and speak. So I'll be there maybe in a couple of weeks or 3 weeks time, Rob, and hopefully I'll probably catch you on.
We can do it on the show as well, where you and I can have a discussion on free speech, because there's a little bit too much jumping backwards and forwards among different things. Because you've said some interesting things that I want to probe you on and see where it goes. Welcome to do that again at some point.
No. Anyway, guys, have a good evening, and everyone who's listening. And take care.
Saracen.
Yeah.
Let him go.
Just before you go, I thought this might interest you, because you're going on about different types of Muslims' interpretation. I'm just, do you see that link I've just given in the chat?
I can't. I'm on Google Hideout on my phone, so I can't read the comments.
Well, basically, it's a site, and it's basically this Islamophobe comes on, and believe it or not, I'm actually spending about a page defending Muslims, and I was curious about your opinion.
I can say Allahu Akbar, my brother. There's hope for you yet. I'll try to convert you one day. No, I'm joking. No.
I'm not going to convert to something I know.
I'm joking. But listen, I appreciate that the fact that you've also said that there is a lot of people who just bash Muslims who have an agenda. I said that before. And even if you beyond the headlines, all these Muslim scare stories. Have a good evening, guys.
Like 7 or 8 times out of 10, it's not even Muslims.
Well, you make more money selling tickets for the ghost train than you do for the speak your weight machine, as James O'Brien would say.
But honestly, just on Sarasan's point, like so many times you see these Muslim scare stories, you look into it, and honestly, 7 or 8 times out of 10, it's not even Muslims.
Well, sometimes you find out it wasn't even real. Weird, isn't it? But I wanted to go back to a question I gave to you. Do you understand why the Jews were persecuted? The real reason why? The real reason the Jews were persecuted in Europe.
Who are you asking?
You. You
Can
came
you
up
give
with
me
all the
just?
examples, but you didn't go into actually why
I
the Jews were picked
I
on.
can go in. I can go into
Simple.
some historical reasons, but can you give me 2 minutes because I really need a piss. I'm on my second bottle of wine.
Good grief! You should go and
Just
have a
give me a
piss.
second.
Let the river flow.
GP, when Raven comes back, I love the conversation. It's great. What I would like for us to do is not to interrupt each other. You didn't do it as much. I'm going to speak to Raven separately.
Oh, you get
Otherwise,
used to Raven. He's
I'm
always
just going to,
disruption. If you
yeah,
look at the little arrow and you click on it, you will find a mute button.
yeah, but people can unmute themselves. So that
We
doesn't
can,
help.
yeah, I know, but we quite often do it with Raven to make him remind himself that sometimes he speaks too much. He comes out with the excuse that he's on a lag, that he can't hear anybody speak until 2 seconds after he's been speaking.
Yeah, what I might do in the future as well is I might not post the link publicly, and I'll give it to people that I want to come on here because
if you want a structured approach, that's
yeah,
the best way.
it's very frustrating. I mean, when we have 3 or more people, either we all need to wait for each other to stop speaking, or we're going to need to cut it down to less people, because otherwise we just don't have as much of a meaningful conversation. And so, you know, that's a big thing for me.
TJ, you still there, or you gone off? TJ? I was wondering how he's in America. They're reacting to this Islamic, was it the Canadian bill, the M103 Islamophobia bill that's been put forward and passed, where you can't offend Islam, and they're going to look into it. Whether he's heard any bad feedback on that.
It's in Canada, by the way, and it's only advisory.
Yeah, I know, but it goes onto your free speech as well, because it's the right to offend people, and the Canadian government, being a left government at the moment, is saying you can't offend people. And they specifically chose that word, and they've refused to use anything else to act as an alternative, a better descriptor. So now they've got an invented crime that doesn't exist. Anyway, rather than wait, Raven, I'm just going to tell you, the reason why the Jews were persecuted was because the kings used to borrow money from the Jews, and if you were in political confrontations with the king, the best way would be to attack the money source, i.e. blame the Jews. And that was what was going on from the 9th century onwards. Blame the Jews because the Jews gave the kings the money of Europe, and if you attack the king, the best way to do it was to attack the Jews. So the kings used to make laws to protect the Jews, and the anti-Jews were people who were against the king.
Do you know how that started?
God, I really could look it up, but it came from a book by Christopher Lee.
The way that it originally started, this idea of Jews controlling the money in the banks, actually came with William the Conqueror.
Yes.
During the time of William the Conqueror, the church declared the interest was unchristian. Yeah, interest was blasphemy. So the idea was, okay, well, just make Jews do it because they don't have souls, and even if they do, it's Jewish souls. So who gives a shit?
Yeah. A lot of it can be traced back to politics and religion in that particular era. Of course, I couldn't explain why the Romans didn't particularly like the Jews or the later Christians. I know that was a lot religious. Was it Constantine? One of Constantine's predecessors took an intense dislike to the Jews, and he kicked them out of Palestine completely.
Well, were they converting at that time? I mean, I know that nowadays Jews don't really tend to convert, but they might have done back in the day. And I actually remember reading an account of a historian who actually was alive in the time of ancient Greece, and it was this very fascinating bit of a book I read that was talking about how he was trying, because obviously they were polytheistic, they believed in Titans and new gods, Zeus and Ares, and they were trying to explain to the public exactly what Jews believed in. It was quite fascinating.
Well, the Jews have never been secretive about their religion. You find texts in the Roman era which detail the Jews supplying the Romans with information about their God and their beliefs. They would keep certain things secret, like the Holy of Holy stuff, but they would let everything else be well and truly known, because how else can you pass on your religion except by describing it to someone else?
Yeah, we definitely were evangelical to a certain point in history.
They probably became less evangelical after they reached safe numbers. It's probably Muslims in the way they behave in countries. They're not very evangelical until they got a large enough community that they can start swaggering around telling everybody about their religion.
GP, I wanted to get back to something you said. If I understood you correctly, you were also sort of, not as far as Saracen clearly, but you were sort of more on the side of we should have a little bit less free speech. Can you articulate what you think we should have less of, or where
I
we should
told you
restrict it?
that the only thing I don't believe in is the freedom to lie. I
So
think
people should not be
we
free
should
to
have.
lie. Should there be a law against it, or are you
I
what
think
should
we've got
happen?
enough laws to work with. We don't need any more.
Okay, so in what sense is that? In what sense would you want to see that become operative in society?
Well, I'd like in the United Kingdom, obviously because it's my own base, the right of poor people to be able to challenge and get legal backing for free to challenge people with money that spread libel or defamatize or spread malicious propaganda,
You
which are
can
not
do
based
that.
on fact.
You can.
For example, the Daily Mail always says the reason the country is going down the toilet is because of the unemployed are all shirkers, the disabled are all faking it, and the immigrants. I mean, obvious lies. There is nothing inherently wrong with disabled people, with unemployed people, or foreigners. They're all humans, you know.
So should the Daily Mail be prevented from saying that, or is your argument that people
I
think they
think
are
if they
saying
are
that?
saying, I think the law would be great if it was enacted that if somebody who was unemployed said, well, no, I'm not a shirk, I'm going down looking for a job every week, and I'm not getting any because they keep on telling me I'm not qualified or I've got no work experience, they should be able to go to the Daily Mail with a lawyer and say, you are defaming me and my expectations. Either print a retraction or I will see you in court to see you and sue you for damages.
So the
At
fact
the
that the Daily,
moment,
the
at the
fact,
moment, the laws only work for people with money.
so the fact that the Daily Mail didn't specifically point out Joe blogs, they just talked about people in general. You feel that anybody who feels like it
Is it a
applies to
lie?
them should be able to sue the Daily Mail.
Is it a lie what they're preaching? That is what it boils down to. It's propaganda and spin designed to provide.
Should that be outlawed?
It is outlawed. On the whole, all the laws we got in the United Kingdom would work really well if they were actually enforced, but they're not. They're there for show. They're curtains on a window to hide what's going on behind the scenes.
Okay, so I think we've moved from free speech to what you consider slanderous or
Well, no,
libel
free
speech.
speech would be telling the truth. If you stood up at Speaker's Corner and came out with all of your arguments that you hold dear, not what you are saying are not lies, are they? You speak from the heart with truth. But I've never heard a Muslim being able to defend what they hold in their Quran as truthful, because there is no backing with the Quran that supports what they say.
Do you think there's any Muslim, or do you think there's Muslims in general that don't actually believe what they say and therefore they are lying? Because remember, lying is intentionally saying something that you know is not true.
Yes, they do it all the time, and
I definitely.
you can often catch them out doing it because they'll say one thing in public and they'll say another thing in private. An often complaint about Muslim apologists, the ones who say things like Islam is the religion of peace, for example, often say that because they haven't the faintest idea what Islam is. They've never read the Quran. They only know it like a parrot might know a few words which they don't understand. They know the Arabic and how to say it and pronounce it, but they don't understand the words or its meaning.
So should they be what? Prosecuted for libel? Should they be prevented from speaking in Speaker's Corner? What is your solution to people you consider to be lying?
Like I said, use the laws which we have in existence at the moment.
Okay, so let's say Mansour goes down to Speaker's Corner and he says the Quran is a book of the Islam is a religion of peace, and here are the verses that say so, and he points out certain verses. What should happen to him?
Let's see.
Because obviously, in my view, he should be able to say what he likes, but I want to hear yours.
Because of humanity and the desire not to punish people just for the sake of it, because you're some kind of divine God. But if Mansour was to do that in a public school, for example, to children under the age of 7, I think he should be thrown out of the school and never be allowed to teach again, because he's abusing children intellectually. He's brainwashing them into being something which they shouldn't be.
Okay, remember what we're talking about here, and that is the public square. We're not talking about institutions.
Yeah, I know.
Although we could
You
have
moved
that.
it into a place where now they're no longer children, but you still have the risk of someone being converted into a falsehood. And what do you do to punish that person? Well, I suppose one could say that the crime punishment has to be defined by the results of his action. For example, you couldn't punish Mansour except to tell him he's wrong, unless you found that his words had converted somebody to then go and fight with ISIS in London.
Okay, which would never happen, isn't it? So that's not
no, it has happened. It has happened. We've had not Mansour, but we've had people like Anjem Chowdhury help convert people into Islam, who have then become killers.
Okay, but what's your evidence that suggests that Anjem Chowdhury doesn't actually believe what he's saying? Because you are the point you are turning on is that they are intentionally lying, and I think Anjem Chowdhury actually believes what he says. He's not going, "Hey, I'm going to go fool people because I actually think it's a religion of peace." He thinks it's a religion that's prone to violence, and that's what he's telling them to do. So, in what sense is he lying? Because that's what your whole point is here. If they're lying, then we should somehow prevent them from doing it, which is still not clear on how we do that. But your point is around how, if it's a lie.
He was quite honest about his Islam and its intentions.
Okay, so he's not a good example. So let's go back to Mansour and let's use the example where he goes to somebody and he says it's a religion of peace.
I suppose
what should happen?
I'm not really a lawyer, so it's difficult for me to try and
should he be allowed? Okay, let's put it this way: should he be allowed to say that in Speaker's Corner?
What he's doing is selling you goods under false premises. So he's guilty of that.
So do you think
Islam, the goods being a religion, it's been sold under false premises. I mean, somebody who does what do you call it, the Ouija stuff and the seances and speaking to ghosts, they have to prove that it actually works. Or else they can't. They have to say it's for entertainment. It's an act. I think people like religious people, theocrats, have to be re-described as no longer a religion but pure entertainment.
Okay, but GP, that's not this. Again, we're drifting slightly away from the point. Your point, as I understand it, is that people who tell falsehoods, which is knowingly saying something that you know to be false and saying that it's true, there should be some kind of sanction.
Is it a falsehood or is it an opinion? As far as I can see, everything Mansour or an apologist in Speaker's Corner is doing is they're offering an opinion which is based on no factual evidence.
So should there be something, is there something wrong with that? And if there is, should there be a sanction, or
No,
you just don't like it personally?
No, there's no reason to sanction opinions. Opinions are not given with authority.
Because I'm still failing to understand why, what you're, where you are drawing the line with freedom of speech. Because as I examine what you say, I'm not clear on when. Give me an example of.
I've given you it.
Okay,
authority. Authority. If it comes from a position of authority, and authority means you could demand something from the person you're speaking from to.
Give me an example. You haven't given me an example.
I did. I gave you the example of somebody in a school.
Okay, but did we not
The
agree that
school
a school
teacher,
is not the
the
same as the
school
public?
teacher is somebody who's speaking from authority. The person in Speaker's Corner has no authority whatsoever. It's given an opinion.
Didn't
Somebody
we?
in the media is speaking from an authority. They've been slapped with a label called news, but they're speaking from authority. You must respect my authority because I am the news. But if
Does
they're
anybody
speaking
in the
from
media
Speaker's
say that?
Corner, they aren't the news. They're just giving an opinion.
Does anybody in the media say that?
Yes, they do.
Point out
You'll-
one person that says that to me, and I'll
I
go
would
look it
say-
up for you.
No. What does
See,
it
GP,
say?
what I'm
What does
noticing
it say
here,
on a paper? It says a newspaper.
GP, what I'm noticing here is you want to draw the line at free speech as somebody that's telling falsehoods. And when I
Deliberate lies
interrogate
from
you,
authority.
instead of
Deliberate lies of authority. I don't like Fox News being able to say they're Fox News when they come up with opinions and then say that is news when it's not. It's an opinion.
okay, let's each of us speak and not interrupt each other. Then we can hear what we're saying. So I'll wait for you to finish, then wait for me to finish, and then you can counter me. If we talk over each other, we don't get a full point done. So you've said to
Can
me,
we
if I
also-
understand,
Can we also keep the sentences brief?
as brief as we can, because I keep asking the same thing, and maybe I'm just not getting you. You've said that if somebody in authority tells a falsehood, that should be prevented under freedom of speech. Have I summarized you correctly?
Yes, I think authority is a keystone.
When we talk about freedom of speech, I'm talking about in the public sphere, and I use Speaker's Corner as an example. You have veered off to a school, an organization, an institution, and I have agreed with you that free speech is not the same in organizations and institutions. So I'm talking about in the public sphere. We could talk about institutions and organizations if you wish, but at the moment I'm talking about in the public sphere. Let's use Speaker's Corner.
If I were
you
to
think
use
it's
Speaker's Corner, then I would say there should be no problem with free speech whatsoever. They can say anything they like as long as it, I suppose, incitement to harm or something that might incite to cause harm. For instance, I don't know if cars go by, but if cars go by, if somebody's standing on the roadside, you don't say, get up, jump. There's a car coming or something to make them jump into the road. You don't do that.
Okay, but that's kind of like fire in a crowded theater, which
Yes.
I do not think that fire in a crowded theater should be banned. And I believe from what you're saying you do. Is that correct?
I would, because it's using authority again, I suppose. Someone's
So if I'm
mimicking
sitting in
authority to make somebody react. They are lying.
So if I'm sitting in a theater and I call out fire, 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 should I not be allowed to do that?
I don't think you should,
Why?
because it could cause severe panic and harm to the individuals within the theatre if they take you as telling the truth. And
if
people
all of
can
them
die very easily in a stampede.
Okay. And if all of them look around and go, what's going on, and they all laugh, is it then okay?
No, because
it's
that
never
doesn't.
okay.
No, because the Hillsborough fire incidents, if somebody has shouted fire, people might have escaped, but they didn't. They stayed within the building and the whole place burned down within 2 minutes.
You're talking about Hillsborough? What are you talking about now?
Well, was it Hillsborough?
Hillsborough
Where
was
the football match with the big fire?
Hillsborough was the stadium that collapsed. There was no freedom of speech involved there at all.
No, in that case, it was the place which burnt down very fast. It took about 2 minutes. I saw the video once at a health and safety fire lecture.
And how is that relevant to what we're talking about?
It was relevant to people looking around looking for a fire they couldn't see because they wouldn't have seen it because the fire burned the whole building down within 2 minutes.
Hey, Anton.
Bye, Anton. Okay. It's getting late, and I don't think we're going to get much further here. What I have seen is you've agreed with me that in the public sphere, in Speaker's Corner, people should be able to say basically whatever they like, apart from a direct incitement to violence.
Well, they don't. Even there, they don't, because if you come up with too weird things in the public arena, you'll end up in a mental institution. They'll lock you up.
I'm not sure
You do
what you're
it-
talking about.
Well, no, you've never experienced a mental institution, possibly.
Now, remember, we're talking about Speaker's Corner here. I know you want to go
Yeah,
off to
I
organizations.
know,
I'm
I
happy to
know.
talk to you about organizations.
Have you ever?
Yeah, you want to clean? You want
Oh, will you fuck off?
I need to
No,
ban him. I don't know how do I ban somebody. I'll have to
I
find
don't
that out.
know anything
If you're in the
about that.
chat and you know how to ban somebody permanently from a hangout, just type in, let me know. Otherwise, I'll look it up.
I'm just saying a lot of people who end up in the acute wards of mental institutions are people who have been saying completely weird and wacky things out on the public street, and they've been picked up by the police and put into care because they've been saying complete or wacky things.
Do you think they should be picked up by the police and put into
Yeah, for
care?
their safety. That was the whole point of it, wasn't it?
And what is the weird and wonderful things they said? I think in future, by the way, I'm going to not post the Google Hangout link, so you guys will have to just say to me in the chat that you want to join, and I'll message you
I
somehow
think we're going to have to
privately.
call it tonight anyway because the idiots have got out of the pub.
Yeah, probably. All right, I think we'll have another go at freedom of speech because it is an interesting topic, and I think it's late, and we're not all thinking as clearly as we might, and hopefully we can do it when we're all fresher and have that conversation a bit more, because I know a lot of people want to veer onto organizations and institutions, and then, you know, they want to mix that with the public sphere. And I'm happy to talk about institutions, and it could well be that, you know, there should be potentially some free restriction of freedom of speech in institutions, schools, whatever. I just haven't heard yet any good argument as to why it needs to be in the public sphere. But okay, I agree. Is there anything else anybody wants to say? Otherwise, we'll wrap it up now.
I'm assuming you don't want me to go into that whole Moses thing.
No,
No,
keep that for
don't
another
have to do
time.
that.
Keep that for another time.
Good luck, everyone.
Oh, yeah.
Is it going to be
Buddy?
a honey today?
Anton, you're done, buddy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Is it,
I'm going to sort him out. Don't worry. You're done, bud.
is there going to be a hadith for the day?
No, there isn't. I'm going to close it off now. I don't have a hadith here, so unless you want to bring one up, I'm kind of done.
I actually do want to. I'm just looking for it.
All right, go ahead.
Let me just see if I can find it. Where is it? Abstract. Muhammad says to brother. Hadith of slavery. Okay. So I'm looking for that one. You know where I said where Abu Bakr beat that slave girl for trying to cover her breasts?
Yeah.
I was looking for that one.
20 seconds, brother. Otherwise, we'll just close it off.
Okay, I'll just give a random one. So from Bukhari, volume 5, number 459, narrated Ibn Mahazari, I entered the mosque and saw Abu Kuhodri and sat beside him and asked him about coitus interruptus. Abu said, we went out with Allah's messenger to the Ghawaz attack upon Banu Mustalik, and we received captives from among the Arab captives, and we desired women, and celibacy became hard on us, and we loved to do coitus interruptus. So when we intended to do coitus interruptus, we said, how can we do coitus interruptus without asking Allah's messenger while he is present upon us? We asked him about it, and he said, it is better for you not to do so, for if any soul till the day of resurrection is predestined to exist, it will exist. And the basic idea of this is, don't worry about knocking up your slaves, because, you know, you want a kid with a slave, you don't want a kid with a slave. Hey, if it happens, it's Allah's will. Can't argue with that.
Cool. All right, guys. Thank you very much. Thanks to Raven, TJ, GP, who's already left. We will see you again next Friday. Potentially, Abu will be back. And and we might have another topic. We'll decide and pop it into the link. So thanks again to everybody, and see you guys. I'll be down to Speaker's Corner on Sunday. Hopefully I'll get a few videos and I'll post them next week. So thanks very much, and take care, and we'll speak to you again next Friday.
Just before you go, do you have any? Do you know the name of the video that Sarasan is on?
No, I don't. Grab me on Skype. I'll have a look. I did watch it, so it should be in my history. So just drop me a Skype message,
Yeah,
and I'll send it to you.
All right,
guys.
cheers, mate.
Thank you. Night.